Daniel Hayes stood in the marble lobby of Sterling Enterprises, staring at the eviction notice crumpled in his jacket pocket. 3 days. That's all he had left before his daughter would be sleeping in his car. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Elena Sterling's assistant appeared, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Hayes, Ms. Sterling will see you now." His stomach dropped. This was it, the firing he'd been dreading. As he rode the elevator to the executive floor, Daniel's mind raced through the impossible math of his life. Hospital bills from his father's death, childcare costs, rent he couldn't pay. At 32, he'd become an expert at drowning slowly. But when Elena Sterling looked up from her desk, what she said wasn't, "You're terminated." It was far more dangerous. "I need you to marry me, Daniel, and I need an answer before you leave this room. Before we dive into this story, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're enjoying this, hit that like button. It really helps. Now, let's get into it. The office was silent except for the hum of the city 40 floors below. Daniel Hayes stood frozen, his hand still on the door he'd just closed behind him. Elena Sterling sat behind a desk that probably cost more than his annual salary, her dark hair pulled back in a severe ponnet that matched the sharp lines of her charcoal suit. She was 28, brilliant, and had the kind of presence that made grown men stumble over their words in board meetings. Daniel had worked in the building's maintenance department for 3 years and had maybe spoken to her twice. Once when a pipe burst on the executive floor, once when she'd held the elevator for him, her phone pressed to her ear, not even glancing his way. Now she was looking directly at him, and the weight of that gaze made his chest tight. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I don't think I heard you correctly." Elena's expression didn't change. "You heard me perfectly. Sit down, Mr. Hayes." He didn't move. "Ms. Sterling, if this is about the requisition forms I filed last week, I can explain." "Sit down." The command wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. Daniel found himself sinking into the leather chair across from her desk, his mind still trying to process what was happening. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, the city sprawled in every direction, gleaming and indifferent. Elena folded her hands on the desk. "I'm going to be very direct with you because I don't have time for anything else. My father built this company over 40 years. When he died 18 months ago, he left control split between myself and my brother Victor, 50% each." Daniel nodded slowly, unsure why he was hearing this. "There was a clause in his will," Elena continued, "a provision that gives full control to whichever of us marries first and remains married for 1 year. My father believed that marriage demonstrated stability, commitment, qualities he valued in leadership." "That's—" Daniel searched for words. "That's archaic." "It's binding." Elena's jaw tightened. "Victor announced his engagement 3 weeks ago. His wedding is scheduled for 2 months from now. If he marries first, I lose everything. The company I've worked for my entire adult life, the vision my father and I shared, all of it goes to a man who sees Sterling Enterprises as nothing more than an asset to liquidate." The weight in her voice surprised him. For just a moment, the ice cracked enough to show something human underneath. "I'm very sorry," Daniel said carefully, "but I still don't understand what this has to do with me." Elena stood, moving to the window. The afternoon light caught the tension in her shoulders. "I need to be married within the next 30 days. The marriage must last 1 year. After that, the company control becomes permanent, and we can quietly divorce. You want to hire someone to marry you. I want to hire you specifically." Daniel felt like he'd been punched. "Why me?" She turned to face him. "Because you're invisible. You work here, so there's a plausible connection, but you're not part of the executive world. No one would question it if I said we'd been quietly seeing each other. You're also desperate, which means you'll honor the agreement." The word desperate hit him like a slap. His face must have shown it because Elena's expression softened by a fraction. "I've done my research, Mr. Hayes. Your father passed away 8 months ago after a long illness. You're raising your daughter alone. You're 3 months behind on rent, you have medical debt collectors calling you daily, and you're about to be evicted." She paused. "I'm not judging you. I'm stating facts that make you the ideal candidate." Daniel's hands clenched on the armrests. The urge to walk out was almost overwhelming, but the eviction notice in his pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. "What exactly are you offering?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Elena returned to her desk and opened a folder, sliding a document across to him. This is a contract. You would move into my home immediately. In public and at company events, we would act as a married couple. At work, we maintain professional distance. You continue your current position. In private, we live separate lives within the same space. For a year. For 1 year, after which we divorce amicably, citing irreconcilable differences or whatever the lawyers recommend. She tapped the second page. In exchange, I'll pay you $5 million. $2 million up front, $3 million when the year ends and the divorce is finalized. The number was so absurd that Daniel actually laughed. It came out harsh and a little unhinged. $5 million. Plus immediate clearing of all your current debts, a trust fund for your daughter's education, and health care coverage for both of you. Daniel stared at the contract without seeing it. $5 million. He could pay off everything. The hospital, the funeral costs, the credit cards he'd maxed trying to keep food on the table. He could give Emma a real life, not the threadbare existence they were currently clinging to. This is insane, he said. It's business. It's fraud. Elena's eyes hardened. It's a legal marriage that satisfies the terms of my father's will. How we feel about each other is irrelevant. What about your brother? Won't he challenge this? Victor will absolutely challenge it, which is why the marriage has to be airtight. No mistakes, no slip-ups, nothing that can be used to prove it's not genuine. She leaned forward. I'm not going to lie to you, Mr. Hayes. This won't be easy. Victor is vicious when he wants something, and he wants this company. He'll investigate every aspect of your life. He'll look for any crack in the story. Then why do this at all? Why not just find someone you actually... He stopped, seeing the answer in her face. I don't have time to find someone I actually care about, Elena said flatly. And even if I did, bringing emotion into this would only complicate things. This is a transaction, clean, clear, and temporary. Daniel looked down at the contract again. The numbers blurred. He thought about Emma, barely 4 years old, asking him last night why they couldn't buy the cereal with the cartoon character on the box. He'd explained that they needed to save money, and she'd nodded solemnly, too young to understand, but already learning that their life was full of things they couldn't have. I need to think about this, he said. You have until 5 o'clock today. His head snapped up. That's 3 hours. Victor's wedding is in 62 days. I need to move quickly. Elena's voice was steel. I'm not trying to pressure you, but those are the terms. If you decline, I'll find someone else. But Mr. Hayes, I should mention, I chose you for a reason. You're a good father. That's not something Victor can fake, and it's something that will make this believable. Your daughter will benefit from this arrangement. She'll want for nothing. The mention of Emma made something twist in his chest. You don't know anything about being a father. No, Elena agreed. But I know what it's like to have one who actually cares. That's not common in my world. For a moment, something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or just a shared awareness of how completely different their lives had been up until this point. Daniel stood up. I'll give you my answer by 5. Elena nodded. My assistant will be waiting for your call. He made it halfway to the door before she spoke again. Mr. Hayes. He turned. Elena was still seated, but something in her posture had shifted. I know this is strange. I know it's asking a lot. But I promise you, I will hold up my end of this agreement. You and your daughter will be taken care of. Daniel didn't trust himself to respond. He just left, the contract clutched in his hand. The maintenance office in the basement was blessedly empty. Daniel sat at his cluttered desk, the contract spread out in front of him, and pulled out his phone. His daughter's daycare had texted 3 times asking about pickup. It was only 2 in the afternoon, but they knew his situation, knew he was always scrambling, always one crisis away from being late. He called his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who sometimes watched Emma when his shift ran over. Daniel, she answered warmly. How are you, dear? I'm okay. Listen, I have a huge favor to ask. Can you get Emma from daycare and watch her for a couple hours? I'll pick her up before dinner. Of course. Is everything all right? He looked at the contract. Yeah, I just need to handle something. After he hung up, Daniel read through the document again. It was surprisingly straightforward. No legal jargon designed to trap him. The terms were exactly what Elena had described. Marriage, 1 year, $5 million. There were clauses about confidentiality, about how the arrangement would be structured, about what would happen if either party violated the terms. There was also a section about Emma. It specified that Daniel's daughter would live with them, that her needs would be provided for, that she would receive health care and education benefits immediately. Seeing it in writing made his throat tight. His phone buzzed. A text from his landlord. Final warning? Pay by Friday or we start eviction proceedings. Daniel closed his eyes, opened them, read the contract one more time. At 4:45, he called Elena Sterling's office. "This is Mr. Hayes," he told her assistant. "Tell Miss Sterling my answer is yes." The next 72 hours moved so fast that Daniel barely had time to process what was happening. Elena's lawyers drew up the official marriage license. A private judge was arranged for a quiet civil ceremony. Daniel's debts, hospital bills, credit cards, funeral costs all disappeared overnight, paid in full by an anonymous benefactor that he knew was Elena. The $2 million advance appeared in a new bank account under his name. When he saw the balance, he had to sit down. He gave notice to his landlord and started packing up the small apartment that had been home for the last 3 years. Emma watched from her spot on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit, confusion written all over her small face. "Daddy, where are we going?" Daniel knelt down in front of her. "We're moving to a new place, sweetheart. Somewhere really nice." "Will my toys come?" "All of them." "And Mr. Hoppy?" She held up the rabbit, one ear torn and re-sewn multiple times. "Especially Mr. Hoppy." She seemed satisfied with this. "Okay. If only everything else were that simple." On Friday evening, a sleek black car arrived to take them to Elena's penthouse. The driver loaded their few boxes, pathetically small against the luxury of the vehicle, and they drove across the city to a neighborhood Daniel had only ever seen in magazines. Elena's building was all glass and steel, with a doorman who greeted them by name and an elevator that required a keycard to access the top floor. Emma pressed her face against the elevator wall, eyes wide. "Daddy, we're going up so high." "I know, baby." The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Daniel stepped out and had to remind himself to breathe. The space was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, art on the walls that might actually be original. Everything was clean lines and muted colors, beautiful and utterly impersonal. Elena emerged from a hallway, dressed more casually than he'd ever seen her, dark jeans and a cream sweater. She looked younger like this, though no less intimidating. "Mr. Hayes, Emma." She nodded to them both. "Welcome." Emma hid behind Daniel's leg. Elena's expression flickered, something almost like uncertainty. "I've had the guest suite prepared for you. There are 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a small sitting area. I thought Emma might want her own space." "That's very generous," Daniel said carefully. "Thank you. The kitchen is fully stocked. My housekeeper, Marie, comes 3 times a week. If you need anything, just leave a note." Elena glanced at Emma, then back at Daniel. "I work long hours. You'll mostly have the place to yourselves in the evenings." "Understood." An awkward silence fell. Elena clearly had no idea how to interact with a 4-year-old, and Emma was still clinging to Daniel's leg like it was a life raft. "I'll show you to your rooms," Elena said finally. The guest suite was bigger than their entire apartment had been. Emma's room had been hastily but thoughtfully furnished. A bed with a white canopy, a bookshelf, a toy chest that was currently empty. Someone had even put flowers on the dresser. "You can redecorate however you'd like," Elena said from the doorway. "Just let Marie know what you need." Daniel set down the box he was carrying. "Ms. Sterling." "Elena," she corrected. "We should probably get used to first names." "Elena, this is all very generous, but you didn't have to go to this trouble." She shrugged, a gesture that seemed foreign on her. "It's not trouble. It's logistics. Emma will be living here for a year. She should be comfortable." Emma had ventured out from behind Daniel and was examining the canopy bed with cautious interest. She climbed up onto it, bouncing experimentally, then looked back at her father with wonder. "Daddy, it's so soft." Something in Elena's expression shifted. "I'm glad you like it," she said quietly. Over the next week, they began the strange dance of learning to live together. Daniel and Emma had their suite. Elena had her master bedroom on the opposite end of the penthouse. They shared common spaces but moved around each other like planets in careful orbit, never quite touching. Daniel quickly learned Elena's patterns. She left for work before 6 in the morning, usually without breakfast. She came home after 8 at night, went straight to her office, and worked for another few hours before disappearing into her bedroom. On the rare occasions they crossed paths, their conversations were brief and polite. "Good morning?" "Good morning. I made coffee if you want some." "Thank you." That was it. That was all. Emma, meanwhile, was adjusting in the way children do, with a mix of wonder and resilience. She loved her new room, loved the building's doorman who always had candy in his pocket, loved the way the city looked from the windows at night. But she also asked about their old apartment, about Mrs. Chen, about the park they used to walk to. "Can we visit?" she asked one night as Daniel tucked her in. "Sure, sweetheart. We can visit." "Do you think Mrs. Chen misses us?" "I know she does. But we'll call her tomorrow, okay?" Emma nodded, satisfied. "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Is Ms. Elena your friend?" Daniel paused. Yes, she's my friend." "She's sad," Emma said matter-of-factly. "What makes you say that?" "Her eyes. They look like yours did after Grandpa went away." The observation hit him harder than it should have. He kissed Emma's forehead. "Get some sleep, baby." After she was asleep, Daniel stood in the suite's small sitting area, looking out at the city. Somewhere in this vast penthouse, Elena was probably still working, alone in her office, burning through emails or strategy documents or whatever it was that consumed her nights. Emma's words echoed in his head. "She's sad." He thought about the contract sitting in his drawer, the marriage license that would be filed next week, the carefully constructed lie they were building. And he wondered, not for the first time, what exactly he'd agreed to. The civil ceremony took place on a Thursday afternoon in a judge's private office. No guests, no flowers, no music. Just Daniel in a suit he'd bought the day before, Elena in a pale blue dress, and 2 lawyers serving as witnesses. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, read through the vows quickly and efficiently. Daniel repeated the words when prompted, hearing his own voice like it belonged to someone else. "I, Daniel Hayes, take you, Elena Sterling, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Elena's voice was steady. "I, Elena Sterling, take you, Daniel Hayes, to be my lawfully wedded husband." Rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that Elena's assistant had purchased. When the judge pronounced them married and told Daniel he could kiss his bride, Elena turned to him with something like panic in her eyes. He leaned in and pressed a brief, chaste kiss to her cheek. "Congratulations," the judge said warmly, completely unaware that she'd just officiated a business transaction. Afterwards, in the elevator down to the parking garage, Elena was silent. Daniel watched the numbers descend and tried to wrap his mind around the fact that he was now, legally, married to this woman he barely knew. "We need to make a public appearance," Elena said as they reached her car. "Somewhere we'll be seen together. Victor needs to know this is happening before he can strategize." "What did you have in mind?" "There's a charity gala tomorrow night. Sterling Enterprises is one of the sponsors. I'm expected to attend." She glanced at him. "We're expected to attend?" Daniel nodded. "Okay. My stylist will come by this afternoon to fit you for a tuxedo." "Elena, I can rent—" "No." Her tone left no room for argument. "If we're doing this, we're doing it right. Victor will be looking for any sign that this isn't legitimate. We can't give him ammunition." She was right, of course. But as they drove back to the penthouse in silence, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap of their own making. The gala was held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, a massive ballroom full of crystal chandeliers and people in clothes that cost more than cars. Daniel had never been to anything like it. The tuxedo Elena's stylist had provided fit perfectly, but he still felt like an imposter. Elena, on the other hand, looked like she'd been born for this. Her gown was midnight blue, elegant and understated, and she moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and making small talk. Daniel stayed close to her, trying not to look as uncomfortable as he felt. "Smile," Elena murmured as they approached a cluster of board members. "You're supposed to be happy." He forced his expression into something pleasant. The board members greeted Elena warmly, their eyes sliding to Daniel with obvious curiosity. "And who is this?" one of them asked. This is my husband, Daniel Hayes, Elena said smoothly, slipping her hand into his. We were married yesterday. The revelation caused a ripple of shock. Several people actually gasped. Married? The board member, Harrison something, Daniel thought, looked between them. Elena, this is rather sudden. Not really. Elena's smile was perfect. Daniel and I have been seeing each other for over a year. We just preferred to keep it private. Well, Harrison recovered quickly. Congratulations to you both. As they moved through the room, the same scene repeated itself. Surprise, congratulations, thinly veiled curiosity. Daniel shook hands until his arm ached, smiled until his face hurt, and lied with every word. Yes, we met through the company. No, it wasn't love at first sight, but it grew. She's an amazing woman. That last one, at least, might have been true. They were at the bar getting drinks when Daniel saw him, a man cutting through the crowd with the kind of presence that made people step aside. He was tall, expensively dressed, and his face was a sharper, colder version of Elena's. That's Victor, Elena said quietly. My brother. Should I just follow my lead? Victor reached them, his eyes moving from Elena to Daniel with obvious calculation. Elena, he said, I heard the most interesting rumor. Victor. Her voice was ice. This is my husband, Daniel Hayes. Daniel, my brother Victor. Victor's handshake was just a fraction too firm. Husband. How sudden. Sometimes when you know, Daniel said, keeping his voice even. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. And what is it you do, Daniel? I work at Sterling Enterprises. In what capacity? Elena's hand tightened on Daniel's arm, a warning. Victor, we're here to enjoy the evening, not conduct interviews. Of course. Victor's gaze lingered on Daniel. I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to get acquainted. After all, we're family now. The word family sounded like a threat. After Victor left, Elena exhaled slowly. He knows something's off. He's going to investigate me. Absolutely. She took a sip of her drink. Which is why we need to make this convincing. How do we do that? Elena set down her glass and turned to face him. Dance with me. Daniel blinked. What? There's a string quartet playing. Married couples dance at these things. She held out her hand. Come on. They moved to the dance floor where a few couples were already swaying to something classical and slow. Daniel placed one hand on Elena's waist, took her hand with the other, and tried to remember the basic waltz steps his mother had taught him at his sister's wedding years ago. Relax, Elena murmured. You look like you're being tortured. I might be. She surprised him with a small smile. I know this isn't easy. You're handling it better than I am. I've had practice. My whole life has been about maintaining appearances. They turned, moving in time with the music. You're doing fine, Daniel. Better than fine, actually. I'm a terrible liar. Then it's lucky we don't have to lie about everything. Her eyes met his. You're kind. You're a devoted father. Those things are real, and they're what will make this believable. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. They danced in silence for a while, the music washing over them, the chandeliers throwing patterns of light across the polished floor. Elena felt insubstantial in his arms. Not fragile exactly, but lighter than he'd expected, like she was used to carrying weight no one else could see. Can I ask you something? He said. Depends on the question. Why did your father write the will that way? The marriage clause? Elena's expression closed off slightly. He was old-fashioned, traditional. He believed marriage made people accountable. But to make it a condition for control of the company? My father loved me, but he didn't entirely trust me, Elena said quietly. He thought I was too ambitious, too cold. He worried I'd turn the company into something heartless. She paused. He was probably right to worry. I don't think you're heartless. She looked at him, something unreadable in her expression. You don't know me, Daniel. No, he agreed. But I'm starting to. The song ended. They separated, the moment breaking like glass, and returned to the crowd to continue their performance. But as the night wore on, Daniel found his eyes drifting back to Elena, the way she commanded a room without seeming to try, The way her mask would slip for just a second when she thought no one was watching, revealing something exhausted underneath. "She's sad," Emma had said, and Daniel was beginning to understand why. Month. They returned to the penthouse after midnight. Elena kicked off her heels the moment they stepped through the door, wincing slightly. "I'm going to make tea," she announced, heading for the kitchen. "Do you want some?" Daniel followed her, loosening his bow tie. "Sure." The kitchen was all marble and steel, pristine and clearly underused. Elena filled the kettle and set it on the stove, moving with the kind of efficiency that suggested this was her nightly ritual. "You did well tonight," she said, getting 2 mugs from the cabinet. "Very convincing. I had a good teacher." She smiled faintly. "Victor's going to dig into your background. Everything about you. Your father's illness. Your financial troubles. Your work history. He'll try to find something that proves this marriage is fraudulent." "There's nothing to find," Daniel said. "It's all true. I was desperate and you made me an offer. But the marriage itself isn't based on love. Is that what he needs to prove, that we don't love each other?" Daniel leaned against the counter. "How do you prove a negative?" "You can't." The kettle began to whistle. Elena poured hot water over tea bags, the steam rising between them. "But you can find evidence that contradicts the claim. If Victor can show that we never spent time together before the marriage, that we don't actually live like a couple, that our story doesn't hold up to scrutiny, that might be enough. So what do? We build a history." Elena handed him a mug. "Receipts from restaurants we supposedly ate at together. Photos that prove we've been dating. Social media posts that mention each other. That's a lot of fabrication. It's covering our bases." She took a sip of tea. "My lawyers are already working on it, but there's something else we need to address." Daniel waited. "Emma?" Elena said. "Victor will see her as a weak point. He'll use her to try to prove you're only in this for money, that you're exploiting me to provide for your daughter." Anger flared in Daniel's chest. "I am providing for my daughter. That's not a crime." "I'm not saying it is. I'm saying we need to control the narrative." Elena's voice was careful. "When we're in public, Emma needs to be part of our story. She's not just your daughter. She's our daughter, in a sense. We're a family unit. She's 4 years old. She doesn't understand what's happening." "Then we don't explain it to her." Elena set down her mug. "We just let her live in this space, go to a good school, have a normal childhood. And when people ask about her, we say that I care about her because I care about you." It made horrible, practical sense, but the idea of using Emma as a prop in their deception made Daniel feel sick. "I won't let her get hurt by this," he said firmly. "Neither will I." Elena's eyes were serious. "I know I'm not good with children. I know I don't understand how to talk to her, but I promise you, Daniel, I won't let Victor use her as ammunition." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, drinking tea like any normal married couple might at the end of a long night, except there was nothing normal about this. "I should get some sleep," Daniel said finally. "Emma will be up early." "Of course." Elena didn't move. "Thank you for tonight, for all of this. You're paying me $5 million. I think thanks are unnecessary." "Still," her voice softened. "Thank you." Daniel left her there in the kitchen, returned to his suite, and checked on Emma. She was fast asleep, Mr. Hoppy clutched in her arms, completely unaware that her father had just spent the evening pretending to be in love with a stranger. He sat on the edge of his own bed, pulling off the tuxedo jacket, and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. The weeks that followed established a rhythm of sorts. Daniel continued working his maintenance job. Elena had insisted, saying it would look suspicious if he suddenly quit, while Emma started at a new preschool near the penthouse. Mornings were chaotic. Elena already gone by the time they woke up, Daniel scrambling to get Emma fed and dressed and out the door. Evenings were quieter. Daniel would pick up Emma from school, make dinner in Elena's enormous kitchen, and wait for Elena to come home. Sometimes she'd join them for the meal. More often, she'd disappear into her office with a plate. On Tuesday night, 3 weeks into their arrangement, Emma was sitting at the kitchen counter coloring when Elena came home earlier than usual. "Hi, Ms. Elena," Emma said without looking up from her drawing. "Hello, Emma." Elena set down her briefcase and hesitated. "What are you drawing?" "A castle." Emma held up the paper, which showed a very lopsided building covered in flowers, with a princess inside. It's beautiful. Do you want to color with me? The question clearly caught Elena off guard. She glanced at Daniel, who was chopping vegetables for dinner. I don't know if Miss Elena has time, Daniel said diplomatically. I have a few minutes, Elena said slowly. She slid onto the stool next to Emma. What should I color? Emma pushed some crayons toward her. You can do the dragon. There's a dragon? Every castle has a dragon, Miss Elena. Daniel hid a smile and continued cooking. Behind him, he could hear Emma giving very serious instructions about which colors should be used and where. Elena's responses were awkward at first, stilted, but gradually something in her voice relaxed. Is the dragon friendly? Elena asked. Sometimes, if you give her cookies. That seems reasonable. When dinner was ready, Elena stayed. They ate together, chicken, stir-fry, and rice, with Emma chattering about her day at school, about her teacher who wore funny glasses, about a boy named Marcus who had pushed her on the swings. Did you push him back? Elena asked. Emma looked scandalized. No, that's not nice. Oh, right. Elena looked genuinely confused. What did you do? I told the teacher. And Marcus had to sit in time out. Emma took a triumphant bite of rice. Elena glanced at Daniel, and he saw something like amusement in her eyes. It transformed her face, made her look years younger. After dinner, Emma asked if Elena would read her a bedtime story. I don't think, Elena started. Please? Daniel expected Elena to make an excuse, but instead she said, All right, one story. He watched them disappear into Emma's room, heard the soft murmur of Elena's voice reading about a bear looking for honey. When Elena emerged 20 minutes later, she looked shaken. She fell asleep, Elena said quietly. She does that. Stories knock her right out. She asked me if I was going to stay. Daniel set down the dish he was washing. What did you say? I said yes. Elena's hands were trembling slightly. I don't know why I said yes. Because she's a kid, and she asked you a direct question. No, I mean, Elena stopped. I meant it. When I said it, I meant it. They looked at each other across the kitchen, and Daniel felt something shift in the air between them, something that wasn't part of the contract. This is getting complicated, Elena whispered. Yeah, Daniel agreed. It is. Neither of them knew what to do with that truth, so they did nothing. Elena went to her office. Daniel finished the dishes, and the penthouse settled into silence, full of questions that neither of them was ready to answer. But the clock was ticking. In a month, Victor would be married. The race for control of Sterling Enterprises was narrowing, and the perfect lie Daniel and Elena had constructed was beginning to feel dangerously close to something real. The investigator showed up on a Thursday morning. Daniel was replacing a faulty light fixture on the 32nd floor when his supervisor found him, looking uncomfortable. Hayes, there's someone asking questions about you in HR. Daniel's stomach dropped. What kind of questions? Employment history, performance reviews, background stuff? His supervisor scratched his jaw. Guy says he's doing a routine check for some insurance thing, but it feels off. Thought you should know. Daniel climbed down from the ladder, his mind racing. Thanks for the heads up. He found Elena in her office 2 hours later, his work uniform still dusty from the morning's repairs. Victor hired someone, Daniel said without preamble. Elena looked up from her computer. Already? I thought we'd have more time. Apparently not. Daniel closed the door behind him. My supervisor said someone's been asking around. They're trying to make it look casual, but it's not. Elena stood, moving to the window. What did they ask about? Everything. How long I've worked here, my performance, my background. He ran a hand through his hair. They'll find out about my father's medical bills, the debt, all of it. We knew they would. Yeah, but knowing it and having it actually happen are two different things. Daniel's voice was sharper than he intended. What if they talk to Emma's daycare? What if they start asking her questions? They won't. Elena turned to face him. There are laws protecting children. Even Victor wouldn't cross that line. You sure about that? The question hung in the air. Elena's expression hardened. No, she admitted.
I'm not sure about anything when it comes to my brother. Daniel sank into one of her office chairs. Through the glass walls, he could see other executives moving through the hallway, their lives uncomplicated by fake marriages and corporate warfare.
We need to be more visible, Elena said. More convincing. Victor's looking for cracks. We can't give him any. What does that mean? It means we start acting like an actual couple. Not just at galas, but everywhere. At the office, around the building, in public. She paused. We need people to believe this is real. Elena, I work in maintenance. You're the CEO's daughter. People already think it's weird that we're together. Then we give them a story that makes sense. Elena sat on the edge of her desk. We met when you fixed something in my office. We started talking. It developed slowly. You were different from the men I usually dated, more genuine, more grounded. I fell for you because you didn't care about my money or my name. Daniel laughed bitterly. Except I do care about your money. That's literally why I'm here. But you didn't pursue me for it. I approached you. Elena's eyes were sharp. That's the truth, Daniel. You can hold on to that when you're lying about everything else. He wanted to argue, but she was right. The best lies were built on foundations of truth. All right, he said. What do you need me to do? Over the next week, they began the performance in earnest. Elena started coming down to the maintenance offices during her lunch breaks, sitting on Daniel's desk while he worked, bringing him coffee from the executive floor's private machine. At first, his coworkers stared. Then they started joking about it. "Man's got game," one of them said, elbowing Daniel. "Landing the Ice Queen herself." Daniel forced a smile. She's not that cold once you get to know her. Still can't believe you kept it quiet for a year. We wanted to make sure it was serious before going public. The lie came easier each time he told it. Elena played her part perfectly. She'd appear in the break room, lean against the counter while Daniel ate a sandwich, ask him about his day like she actually cared. To anyone watching, they looked like any couple navigating the early stages of marriage. But in the penthouse, things were more complicated. Emma had started asking questions. Why did Miss Elena sleep in a different room? Why didn't they eat breakfast together? Why did Daddy seem nervous all the time? Adults are complicated, sweetheart, Daniel said one night, tucking her in. Is Mrs. Elena mad at you? No, baby, she's not mad. Then why doesn't she smile more? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. The truth was, Elena did smile more now. Not often, and never for long, but it happened. Usually when Emma said something unexpected, or when Daniel made a dry comment about the absurdity of their situation. Those moments felt like glimpses of someone else, someone younger, less guarded. One evening, Daniel was cooking dinner when Elena came home and actually joined him in the kitchen instead of disappearing. She loosened her tie and poured herself a glass of wine. Victor's investigator filed his preliminary report, she said. Daniel's hand stilled on the knife. And? He found everything we expected, your father's illness, your debt, the eviction notice, but nothing that proves the marriage is fake. Elena took a sip of wine. The investigator noted that coworkers confirm we've been seeing each other for months, that we appeared genuinely affectionate in public. So we're safe? For now. But Victor won't stop digging. She set down her glass. His wedding is in 3 weeks. He's running out of time, which makes him dangerous. Daniel resumed chopping vegetables, his movements mechanical. What's his fiancée like? Clarissa? She's exactly what you'd expect. Trust fund, society connections, no opinions of her own. Elena's voice was dismissive. She's a prop, just like I assumed you would be. Ouch, Elena winced. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, and you were right. Daniel scraped the vegetables into a pan. That's what we agreed to. I'm here to make you look good and collect a paycheck. Daniel? It's fine. He turned up the heat on the stove. I'm not offended. This is a business arrangement. We both know what it is. But the words felt hollow, and from the look on Elena's face, she knew it too. They ate dinner in uncomfortable silence. Emma, oblivious to the tension, chattered about her day at school, about a girl named Sophie who could do a cartwheel, about a book her teacher had read about penguins. Can we get a penguin, Daddy? Penguins need to live somewhere cold, sweetheart. We could put it in the freezer. Elena actually laughed at that, a real laugh that surprised all three of them. Emma beamed. Mrs. Elena thinks it's a good idea.
Ms. Elena thinks you're very creative, Elena said, her voice gentler than Daniel had ever heard it. But your daddy's right. Penguins need special homes. What about a dog? Daniel and Elena exchanged glances. This was dangerous territory. Maybe someday, Daniel said carefully, but we have space now. Emma gestured around the penthouse. Lots of space. I'm not home enough for a dog, Elena said. It wouldn't be fair to the animal. Daddy's home. He could take care of it. Emma, that's enough, Daniel said. We're not getting a dog right now. Emma's face fell. She pushed food around her plate, sulking. Elena watched this interaction with something like fascination. How do you do that? She asked Daniel. Do what? Tell her no without making her feel bad about asking. Daniel shrugged. Practice. Lots of practice. My father just said no and expected that to be the end of it. Elena's voice was distant. If we pushed back, there were consequences. Emma looked up at Elena with wide eyes. That's mean. It was, Elena agreed quietly. After dinner, Emma asked Elena to read to her again. This time Elena agreed without hesitation. Daniel cleaned up the kitchen, listening to the soft murmur of Elena's voice drifting from Emma's room. When she emerged half an hour later, her careful composure had cracked. She asked me if I was her mom now, Elena said. Daniel froze. What did you tell her? I said I wasn't her mom, but that I cared about her. Elena's hands were shaking. Was that the right thing to say? Yeah, that was exactly right. She said her real mom left when she was a baby, that she doesn't remember her. Daniel's jaw tightened. Her mother had addiction problems. She left when Emma was 6 months old. I haven't heard from her since. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off. He dried his hands on a towel. Emma's used to it just being us. All of this, the penthouse, you, the new school, it's a lot for her to process. She seems happy. She is, but she's also 4. She doesn't understand that this is temporary. The word temporary settled between them like lead. We should talk about that, Elena said, about what happens when the year ends. You mean the divorce? Yes. How we'll handle it with Emma, what we'll tell her. Daniel leaned against the counter. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. We should. We need to prepare her, make sure the transition doesn't traumatize her. Transition? Daniel laughed without humor. You mean going from this, he gestured around the expensive kitchen, back to whatever I can afford on $2 million after taxes and Emma's trust fund? You'll be comfortable. More than comfortable. But not this. Not our own bedroom with a canopy bed and a view of the city. Not a school where the other kids' parents are doctors and lawyers. Not you. Elena flinched. She'll adjust. Will she? Daniel's voice rose. Or will she spend the rest of her childhood wondering why Miss... Elena stopped reading to her at night? Why we had to leave? Daniel, forget it. He threw the towel onto the counter. You're right. We'll figure it out. We've got time. He left before she could respond, retreating to his suite, closing the door. On the other side, he could hear Elena moving through the penthouse, her footsteps eventually fading toward her bedroom. Daniel sat on his bed and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his bank account, the one with $2 million sitting in it, still incomprehensible. Money that could change Emma's life. Money he'd earned by lying to everyone, including himself. The next morning, Daniel woke to Emma crawling into his bed. Daddy, I heard you and Miss Elena fighting. He pulled her close. We weren't fighting, baby. We were just talking. You sounded mad. I wasn't mad at her. I was just... He trailed off, unsure how to explain. Sometimes grown-ups get frustrated. It doesn't mean anything. Emma was quiet for a moment, then, I like her. I know you do. She's not good at playing, but she tries. And she reads the voices funny, which makes me laugh. Emma looked up at him. Do you like her? Daniel considered the question. A month ago, the answer would have been simple. But now, after weeks of shared meals and late-night conversations and watching Elena color dragons with his daughter, the answer wasn't clear anymore. Yeah, he said finally. I like her. Good. Because she's family now, right? Family. The word stabbed through him. Right, he managed. At work that day, Daniel found a note taped to his locker. Just an address and a time, 8 p.m. tonight. He recognized Elena's handwriting. The address led him to a small Italian restaurant in a neighborhood he'd never been to. It wasn't fancy, red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, the smell of garlic and tomatoes heavy in the air. Elena was already there, sitting at a corner table wearing jeans and a simple sweater. "What's this?" Daniel asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Dinner. Away from the penthouse, away from work." She pushed a menu toward him. "I thought we could use a break from performing." "Isn't this still performing? We're in public." "Not really. No one here knows who I am." Elena glanced around. "This was my father's favorite restaurant. He'd bring me here when I was young, before he got successful, before everything got complicated." Daniel looked at her, really looked. Without the armor of her business suits and the coldness of her usual demeanor, she looked almost normal. Tired, yes, but human. "I'm sorry about last night," Elena said. "You were right. I haven't thought about how this affects Emma. I've been so focused on the company, on beating Victor, that I forgot there's a child involved. She's gotten attached to you." "I know." Elena's voice was soft. "I've gotten attached to her too, which is a problem." "Why is it a problem?" "Because this ends, Daniel. In less than a year, we go back to our separate lives. Emma can't think of me as a permanent part of hers." A waiter appeared, breaking the moment. They ordered without looking at the menus. Elena clearly knew what she wanted, and Daniel just chose something at random. When they were alone again, Elena leaned forward. "We need to talk about boundaries. What's acceptable between us? What crosses the line?" "I thought we already established that. Separate bedrooms, separate lives." "But we're not living separate lives anymore. We eat together. We talk. Emma asks me questions about my day. You leave coffee for me in the morning." Elena's fingers traced the rim of her water glass. "The lines are blurring. So what do you want to do about it?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me thinks we should pull back, maintain more distance. But another part knows that won't work. Victor's watching too closely. We have to be convincing." "And which part is winning?" Elena met his eyes. "I'm not sure anymore." Their food arrived. They ate in silence for a while, the restaurant filling up around them with couples and families, all of them real. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said eventually. "Go ahead." "Why did you really choose me? You said I was invisible, desperate, easy to control, but you could have found a dozen other guys in the same situation. Why me specifically?" Elena set down her fork. "Do you remember about a year ago there was a water main break on the executive floor?" Daniel nodded. He'd been part of this crew that fixed it, working through the night to minimize damage. "It was late," Elena continued, "past midnight. Everyone else had gone home, but I was still working. You came to check the repairs, make sure everything was holding." She paused. "You had your daughter with you. She was asleep in one of those carriers on your back." Daniel remembered. His regular babysitter had canceled, and he couldn't afford to miss the overtime. "I asked you why you'd brought her to work," Elena said. "And you told me that she was safer with you than anywhere else in the world, that you'd carry her through fire if you had to." "I don't remember saying that." "You did. And the way you looked at her," Elena's voice caught. "I'd never seen anyone look at another person like that, like they were worth more than everything else combined." Daniel didn't know what to say. "When I needed someone for this arrangement, I remembered that moment," Elena continued. "I thought, if I'm going to let someone into my life, even temporarily, it should be someone who understands what it means to actually care about another person. Someone real." "I'm just trying to survive, Elena." "So am I," she said quietly. "Just in a different way." They finished dinner and walked back to where Elena had parked her car. The night air was cool, the city alive with Friday night energy. People streamed past them, heading to bars and clubs, their laughter echoing off buildings. "Thank you for this," Daniel said as they reached the car. "For dinner, for being honest. We should probably do it more often. The honesty part, I mean." "Yeah, we probably should." Elena unlocked the car but didn't get in. "Daniel, what I said last night about you being a prop, I was wrong. You're not that. You've never been that." "What am I then?" She looked at him for a long moment. "I'm still figuring that out." They drove back to the penthouse in silence, but it felt different than before.
less empty, more full of things neither of them knew how to say. When they got home, Emma was already asleep. Mrs. Chen, who'd been watching her, gathered her things and left with a knowing smile. Daniel paid her, then found Elena in the kitchen making her usual nighttime tea. "Want some?" she offered. "Sure." They sat at the kitchen island, mugs warming their hands, the penthouse dark except for the under-cabinet lights.
"Victor's wedding is in 2 weeks," Elena said. "After that, the real battle begins. He'll challenge the marriage, try to prove it's fraudulent. It's going to get ugly." "I can handle ugly." "Can you?" Elena turned to look at him. "He'll come after you, Daniel."
"He'll drag your name through the mud, imply you're a gold digger, make you look like you took advantage of a lonely woman."
"Let him. I know why I'm here. So do you. But Emma doesn't. And when this gets public, when it's in the news and on social media, other kids will see it. They'll repeat what their parents say. She'll hear things." Daniel's grip tightened on his mug.
"Are you saying we should stop? Call it off?"
"No. I'm saying we need to be prepared for it to get worse before it gets better."
Elena's eyes were serious. "And I need to know you're still in this, that you won't back out when Victor starts his campaign." "I'm in this," Daniel said firmly. "I gave you my word. Your word is worth money. My word is worth my daughter's future. There's nothing more valuable than that." Elena studied him, then nodded. "Okay, then we move forward. Together." "Together," she agreed. The days accelerated after that. Victor's wedding came and went, a massive affair at some country estate that made the news and social media for days. Daniel and Elena sent a gift and a polite note of congratulations, then waited for the other shoe to drop. It took less than 48 hours. Victor filed a formal challenge with the company's board, claiming Elena's marriage was a sham designed to circumvent their father's intentions. He demanded an investigation, a review of the marriage's legitimacy, and threatened legal action if the board sided with Elena. The story leaked to the press within hours. By the next morning, Daniel's face was on the front page of the business section. "Janitor marries heiress. Love story or corporate scheme?" Daniel found out when his phone started blowing up with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters, mostly, asking for comments. He turned off his phone and went to find Elena. She was in her office, looking more composed than anyone had a right to be under the circumstances. "Don't read the articles," she said when she saw him. "They're designed to provoke." "Too late. Someone left a copy of the journal on my desk." Daniel closed the door. "They called me a working-class opportunist. They called me desperate and delusional. We're both getting hit." Elena gestured to her computer screen. "The board wants to meet with us, together. They want to hear our side of the story." "When?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. She stood, moved to the window. "This is it, Daniel. This is where Victor makes his move. If we can convince the board that our marriage is legitimate, he loses. If we can't, we lose everything." "Yes." Daniel joined her at the window. 40 floors down, the city continued on, oblivious to their private war. "What do they want to hear?" he asked. "The truth, or at least a version of it." Elena turned to face him. "They'll ask how we met, how the relationship developed, why we kept it secret. They'll want details, specifics, things that prove this isn't just a contract marriage." "But it is a contract marriage." "It started that way," Elena said carefully. "But is that still what it is?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them wanted to examine. "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "Neither do I. But we have until tomorrow to figure it out." That night, they stayed up late preparing. Elena drilled him on their fabricated history, the dates they'd supposedly been on, the conversations they'd had, the moment everything changed. Daniel tried to memorize it all, but the lies tangled in his head, mixing with real memories of late-night talks and Emma's laughter and the way Elena looked when she forgot to be guarded. "You're overthinking it," Elena said around midnight. They were sitting on the floor of her office, papers spread around them. "Just keep it simple. We met at work, we talked, we fell for each other. That's all they need to know." "What if they ask why we didn't tell anyone?" "We wanted to keep it private. My relationships have always been scrutinized, turned into gossip. You were worried about how it would affect your job, your standing at the company. We needed to be sure before going public." And we got married so quickly because we knew it was right. Sometimes you just know. Elena's voice softened. That part's not entirely a lie, is it? Daniel looked at her. She was exhausted, her hair falling out of its usual perfect style, her makeup faded. She looked more real than he'd ever seen her. No, he admitted. I guess it's not. They worked for another hour before Elena finally called it quits. Daniel helped her gather the papers, their hands brushing as they reached for the same folder. The contact was brief, accidental, but neither of them pulled away immediately. We'll be fine, Elena said, though it wasn't clear if she was reassuring him or herself. We just have to get through tomorrow. And then what? And then we keep going, one day at a time. Daniel nodded. One day at a time. He left her in her office and returned to his suite. Emma was asleep, mister. Hoppy clutched tight, unaware that tomorrow her father would have to lie his way through the most important meeting of his life. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondered when exactly this arrangement had stopped feeling like just business. When Elena had stopped being his boss and started being something else. When the penthouse had started feeling less like a prison and more like... He didn't let himself finish that thought. But sleep, when it finally came, was full of boardrooms and questions he didn't have answers to, and Elena's voice asking him what was real and what wasn't, and the terrible suspicion that he no longer knew the difference. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, a table that could seat 30, portraits of Sterling Enterprises founders staring down with judgment from mahogany-paneled walls. Daniel had walked past this room 100 times while fixing pipes or replacing light fixtures, never imagining he'd be sitting at that table as anything other than hired help. Now he sat beside Elena, facing 12 board members who looked at him like he was something they'd found on the bottom of their shoes. Victor sat at the far end of the table, his lawyer beside him, wearing an expression of barely concealed satisfaction. His new wife, Clarissa, was conspicuously absent. This wasn't about his marriage, after all. This was about destroying Elena's. Let's begin, said Robert Harrison, the board chairman. He was 70, white-haired, and had known Elena since she was a child. Mr. Sterling has raised serious questions about the legitimacy of Ms. Sterling's marriage. We're here to address those concerns. Victor leaned forward. I'll be direct. My sister married a janitor. No offense, Mr. Hayes. Some taken, Daniel said evenly. Less than 2 months before my own wedding, after keeping this supposed relationship completely secret for over a year. The timing is suspicious. The circumstances are suspicious. Everything about this screams fraud. Elena's hand found Daniel's under the table, her fingers cold. He squeezed back, a silent message. We've got this. Victor, you're entitled to your suspicions, Elena said, her voice steady. But suspicion isn't proof. Daniel and I are legally married. We've complied with every requirement of Father's will. Legally married, yes, but legitimately married? That's what we're here to determine. Victor opened a folder sliding copies of documents across the table. I had an investigator look into Mr. Hayes' financial situation. Did you know that 2 months before your marriage he was being evicted? That he had over $200,000 in medical debt? That he was desperate? I knew, Elena said. Daniel was upfront with me about his situation. How convenient. A wealthy heiress, a struggling single father. Sounds like the plot of a bad romance novel. Sounds like real life, Daniel cut in. Not everyone's problems can be solved with a trust fund, Mr. Sterling. Victor's eyes narrowed. Tell me, Mr. Hayes, when exactly did you fall in love with my sister? The question was a trap, and they both knew it. Daniel took a breath, reaching for the story they'd rehearsed. There wasn't one moment, he said. It built over time. We'd talk when I was working on her floor, just small conversations at first. She wasn't what I expected. And what did you expect? Someone cold, untouchable. But she wasn't like that when it was just us. Daniel glanced at Elena. She was funny, sharp. She actually listened when I talked about Emma, about being a single parent. Made me feel like I wasn't invisible. How touching, Victor said dryly. And when did these conversations turn romantic? About 8 months ago, Elena said. We got coffee together, then dinner. We kept it quiet because of exactly this. The judgment, the assumptions. People don't understand relationships that don't fit their expectations. Harrison spoke up. Ms. Sterling, you could have married anyone. Why someone from your own company's maintenance staff? Because Daniel doesn't want anything from me except honesty, Elena said. Every other man I've dated has seen me as an acquisition. A way to climb higher, get richer, make connections. Daniel already had the only thing that mattered to him, his daughter. He didn't need me. He chose me anyway. The words landed with unexpected weight. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Beautiful story, Victor said. Shame it's not true. He pulled out another document. These are phone records, Miss Sterling, yours and Mr. Hayes's. For the entire year you claim to have been dating, there are exactly 4 calls between your numbers. 4. In 12 months. Elena didn't flinch. We saw each other at work almost daily. We didn't need to call. What about texts? Emails? We talked in person. Is that so hard to believe? In this day and age? Yes, actually. Victor was enjoying this. Most couples communicate constantly, but you two? Nothing. No digital footprint at all. Almost like you were never actually together until you needed to be. We valued our privacy, Daniel said, and our time together was at work, where everything's monitored. We didn't want to leave evidence that could be used against us. How paranoid, Victor observed, or how calculated. Harrison held up a hand. Mr. Sterling, you've made your point about the timeline being suspicious, but suspicion isn't enough to invalidate a legal marriage. Do you have actual proof of fraud? Victor smiled. I'm getting there. He nodded to his lawyer, who pulled out a laptop and set it up at the end of the table. What I'm about to show you was obtained legally through a private investigator who was granted access to Sterling family properties. Elena's hand tightened on Daniel's. He felt her entire body go rigid. The laptop screen came to life, showing video footage. The quality was grainy but clear enough. It was the penthouse. Their penthouse. Multiple camera angles showing the living room, kitchen, hallways. You had us under surveillance? Elena's voice was ice. I had concerns about fraudulent activity related to my inheritance. A judge agreed those concerns warranted investigation. Victor pressed play. The footage showed them living separate lives. Elena leaving early in the morning while Daniel got Emma ready for school. Daniel cooking dinner alone. Elena working in her office while Daniel put Emma to bed. Night after night of existing in the same space without touching, without intimacy, like strangers sharing an address. Daniel's stomach sank. This was bad. But then the footage jumped to different moments, Elena sitting at the kitchen counter while Emma colored beside her. Daniel and Elena having tea late at night, talking quietly. A moment where Elena laughed at something Daniel said, genuine and unguarded. Daniel's hand briefly touching Elena's shoulder as he passed her a mug. And then, the moment that made Daniel's breath catch, footage from just 2 nights ago. He and Elena on the living room couch, going over paperwork for this very meeting. The camera caught them falling asleep there, Elena's head on Daniel's shoulder, his arm around her. They'd woken up around 3 a.m., both embarrassed and gone to their separate rooms. But the footage showed something that couldn't be faked. Comfort. Ease. 2 people who'd forgotten, just for a moment, that they were supposed to be pretending. As you can see, Victor said, they maintain separate bedrooms. They barely interact. This is not a marriage. This is a business arrangement masquerading as one. Harrison studied the screen. Mr. Sterling, this footage also shows them spending significant time together, talking, sharing meals, caring for the child. It's not the conventional arrangement, but many modern marriages aren't. They're roommates at best, Victor insisted. There's no physical intimacy, no romance, nothing that suggests actual marriage. That's private, Elena snapped, and none of your business. It becomes my business when it affects my inheritance. Victor leaned back. I also have testimony from Sterling employees who say Mr. Hayes barely knew you before the marriage announcement, from Emma's daycare providers who were surprised to learn you existed, from neighbors in Mr. Hayes's old building who never saw you visit once. We were discreet, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. You were non-existent, Victor corrected, because the relationship didn't exist until you needed it to. The room fell silent. The board members exchanged looks, some sympathetic, some calculating. Harrison rubbed his temples. Ms. Sterling, I've known you since you were 10 years old, he said quietly. I respected your father deeply. So I'm going to ask you directly, and I expect an honest answer. Is this marriage legitimate? Elena stood up, and for a moment Daniel thought she was going to confess everything. His heart hammered. This was it. The end of the lie. The end of everything. But Elena's voice, when she spoke, was steady. When my father died, I was devastated. I threw myself into work because I didn't know how else to cope. The company became everything to me, the only way I could still feel connected to him. She looked at the board members, meeting each person's eyes. But that kind of life is lonely, empty. I was successful and miserable. She turned to Daniel, and something in her expression made his throat tight. Then I met Daniel, and he reminded me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. He showed me what it looks like to actually care about another person more than yourself. Elena's voice softened. Yes, the timing was convenient. Yes, we rushed, but that doesn't make it fake. It makes it imperfect and human and real. Victor scoffed. You expect us to believe? I don't care if you believe it. Elena cut him off, her voice sharp again. The law doesn't require you to approve of my marriage or understand it. It just requires that it exists. And it does. A marriage that serves your financial interests, Victor shot back. As opposed to your marriage? Elena's laugh was bitter. Please, Victor. Clarissa's family's shipping connections will boost Sterling's logistics division by 30%. Everyone at this table knows your wedding was as much a merger as anything else. At least I had the decency not to lie about my motivations. Then admit it, Victor demanded. Admit this is a sham. It started as an arrangement, Elena said, and Daniel's heart stopped. I needed a husband to satisfy father's will. Daniel needed financial stability. We were honest with each other about what we wanted, but what it started as isn't what it became. She looked at Daniel again, and he saw something in her eyes that terrified him. Truth. I didn't expect to care about him, Elena continued. I didn't expect his daughter to become the best part of my day. I didn't expect that coming home would start to mean something beyond just a place to sleep. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being about the company and started being about... She stopped herself, but the damage was done. Or maybe it was the opposite of damage. Harrison cleared his throat. I think we've heard enough. The board will deliberate and... Wait, Daniel said, standing. Every eye in the room turned to him. I need to say something. Elena's expression was panicked. Don't, her eyes said. Don't confess. But Daniel wasn't going to confess. He was going to do something far more dangerous. He was going to tell the truth. Mr. Sterling is right about some things, Daniel began. I was desperate. I was drowning in debt and about to lose my apartment. When Elena offered me this arrangement, I took it because I needed the money. That's not a secret. That's just reality. Victor's smile was triumphant. He thought he'd won. But here's what you got wrong, Daniel continued, his voice gaining strength. You think that because I needed help, I can't also have genuine feelings. You think that because this started as a transaction, it has to stay that way. That's not how people work. He turned to Elena, speaking to her instead of the board. I didn't know you when I agreed to this. You were just my boss, someone powerful and untouchable. I expected you to stay that way. His voice softened. But you didn't. You learned how Emma likes her sandwiches cut. You started leaving sticky notes with terrible jokes on the fridge. You fell asleep during a movie last week and snored, which you'll definitely deny later. A few board members actually smiled at that. I've watched you try to braid Emma's hair and fail 3 times before getting it right, Daniel said. I've seen you take work calls at midnight, fighting for this company because you believe in what your father built. I've seen you be vulnerable and scared and real. And yeah, I'm still here for the money. I won't lie about that. But I'm also here because... He stopped, the words catching in his throat. Because finishing that sentence would change everything. Elena was staring at him, her eyes bright with something he couldn't name. Because she matters, Daniel said finally. Emma matters. This life we're building, however temporary, matters. And if you think you can watch surveillance footage and understand what happens between 2 people, you're wrong. Some things don't show up on camera. The room was silent. Victor recovered first. Very touching, Mr. Hayes. But it doesn't change the facts. This marriage was contracted for financial gain. So was yours, Daniel said flatly. The difference is,
I'm honest about it. Harrison stood up. This meeting is adjourned. The board will review all evidence and testimony. We'll reconvene in 3 days with our decision. He looked at Elena. Until then, both parties maintain their current positions and responsibilities. As the board members filed out, Victor approached them, his lawyer trailing behind. Enjoy your penthouse while you still can, Victor said quietly. In 3 days, you'll be right back where you started, Hayes, and my sister will learn a valuable lesson about trust. The only thing I learned, Elena said coldly, is that you're exactly the man Father worried you'd become. Ruthless without purpose, powerful without principles. Father left us equal power for a reason. He knew neither of us was fit to run this company alone. Then it's a good thing I'm not alone anymore, Elena said, taking Daniel's hand. Victor's smile was cruel. We'll see how long that lasts. After he left, Elena and Daniel stood in the empty boardroom, still holding hands. That was either brilliant or catastrophic, Elena said. I can't tell which. Probably both. She looked up at him. Did you mean what you said? About me mattering? Daniel thought about lying, about keeping the walls up and the distance safe. But he was tired of lying. Yeah, he said. I meant it. Elena's breath caught. Daniel, don't. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. We don't have to talk about it right now. Let's just get through the next 3 days. They left the building together, Daniel's car parked on a different level than Elena's. As they waited for the elevator, the silence between them felt full of words neither knew how to say. I need to pick up Emma, Daniel said when the elevator arrived. I'll come with you. He looked at her, surprised. You don't have to. I know, but I want to. Elena stepped into the elevator. Is that okay? Daniel followed her in. Yeah, that's okay. They picked up Emma together, and she lit up when she saw Elena, chattering about a painting she'd made and a game they'd played at recess. In the car, Emma sang songs she'd learned at school, off-key and enthusiastic. Elena listened with a small smile, occasionally glancing at Daniel. When they got back to the penthouse, Emma asked if they could all make dinner together. Like a team, she explained seriously. Everyone has a job. So they did. Elena chopped vegetables under Daniel's instruction, her technique terrible but improving. Emma set the table, placing napkins with careful precision. Daniel handled the actual cooking, trying not to laugh, when Elena asked if you were supposed to peel carrots. You've never peeled a carrot? He asked. I've never cooked. Period. We had chefs growing up. Ms. Elena is learning, Emma announced proudly. She's getting better. After dinner, they ended up in the living room. Emma insisted on showing Elena her favorite cartoon, which involved talking animals and a lot of singing. Daniel sat on one end of the couch, Elena on the other, Emma between them. Halfway through the episode, Emma fell asleep, her head in Elena's lap. She does this, Daniel said quietly. Falls asleep in the middle of things. Elena looked down at Emma, her hand unconsciously stroking the child's hair. She feels safe. Yeah. What happens if we lose? Elena's voice was barely a whisper. If the board sides with Victor, then we lose. The company goes to him, and we figure out what comes next. You'll still get your money. That's in the contract regardless of the board's decision. I know. Daniel paused. What will you do? I don't know. Work somewhere else, I guess. Start over. Elena's hand stilled on Emma's hair. I've never had to start over before. I've always had the company, the Sterling name. Without that, I don't know who I am. You're the woman who learned to peel carrots tonight, who reads bedtime stories with funny voices, who works until midnight because she cares about something bigger than herself. Daniel met her eyes. You're not your father's company, Elena. You're more than that. Am I? Yeah, you are. Emma stirred in her sleep, making a small sound. Elena looked down at her with an expression Daniel had seen before, on his own face, in mirrors, when he watched his daughter sleep. Love. Complicated and terrifying and real. We should get her to bed, Elena said. Daniel stood, carefully lifting Emma into his arms. She didn't wake, just buried her face against his shoulder. Elena followed them to Emma's room, helping pull back the covers, tucking Mr. Hoppy beside her. In the hallway outside Emma's room, they stood in the dim light,
neither quite ready to retreat to their separate spaces. "Thank you," Elena said, "for what you said today, in the boardroom." "I meant it." "I know. That's what scares me." "Why does it scare you?" Elena looked at him, and for once her walls were completely down. "Because in 8 months, this ends. We signed a contract. 1 year, then we're done. And if I let myself feel, if we let this become real, how do we just walk away from that?" Daniel didn't have an answer. The contract sat in his drawer, clear and binding. 1 year. Then divorce. Then back to their separate lives. Except he couldn't imagine his life without Elena's terrible jokes on the fridge anymore. Without her coming home late and Daniel leaving dinner warming in the oven. Without Emma asking when Ms. Elena would be home. "Maybe we don't have to figure that out tonight," he said. "No, but we'll have to figure it out eventually." She was right, of course. But standing in that hallway with Emma sleeping peacefully and the city humming beyond the windows, Daniel didn't want to think about eventually. He wanted to stay in this moment where things were complicated but somehow, impossibly, also simple. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Daniel." They went to their separate rooms, but Daniel lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about surveillance footage and board meetings, and the way Elena's eyes had looked when he said she mattered. The next 3 days were excruciating. Daniel went to work, fixed pipes and replaced fixtures, and fielded questions from coworkers who'd seen the news coverage. Elena went to her office, attended meetings, and maintained the same professional composure that had defined her entire career. At home, they moved around each other carefully, aware that everything was about to change, but not knowing how. Emma, oblivious to the tension, continued being 4 years old, demanding mac and cheese for dinner, insisting on wearing her purple dress 3 days in a row, asking why the moon followed their car at night. On the third evening, Elena got the call. She was in her office when her phone rang. Daniel heard her voice, sharp and clear, saying, "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." Then silence. Daniel found her standing at her office window, her back to him, completely still. "Elena?" "The board made their decision," she said without turning around. "Harrison called. They're announcing it tomorrow morning, but he wanted to give me advance notice." Daniel's heart was pounding. "And?" Elena turned to face him, and her expression was unreadable. "They sided with us," she said. "The marriage stands. I keep my position. Victor's challenge is dismissed." Relief flooded through Daniel. "That's incredible. We won." "We won," Elena repeated, but she didn't sound victorious. She sounded lost. "What's wrong? This is what we wanted." "Is it?" Elena moved toward him. "We get to keep pretending for another 8 months. Living this half-life where nothing is real but nothing is fake either. Looking forward to a divorce that's already scheduled on our calendars like a dentist appointment." "Elena, Emma asked me today if I was her mom." Elena's voice cracked. "She said that Sophie at school has a mom and a dad, and she has a dad and a Ms. Elena, but was that basically the same thing? And I didn't know what to tell her, Daniel, because in 8 months I won't be anything to her. I'll just be someone who used to live with you." Daniel closed the distance between them. "We knew this would be hard." "Hard?" Elena laughed bitterly. "Hard is working late nights. Hard is dealing with Victor's schemes. This is impossible. This is—" She stopped, her composure finally shattering. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she looked as shocked by them as Daniel felt. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her face. "I don't cry. I never cry." "Hey." Daniel caught her hand, stopping her from scrubbing away the tears. "It's okay. It's not okay. None of this is okay." Elena looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes nearly broke him. "I thought I could do this. I thought I could keep it compartmentalized, keep it simple. But it's not simple anymore, and I don't know how to fix that." "Maybe it doesn't need to be fixed." "What does that mean?" Daniel took a breath. This was the ledge, the point of no return. He could step back, keep things safe, honor the contract they'd signed. Or he could jump. He jumped. "It means the contract was written by people who didn't know what this would become," Daniel said. "It means plans change, feelings change. Maybe the agreement we made 3 months ago doesn't work anymore." Elena stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to spend the next 8 months counting down to when this ends. I'm saying Emma's not the only one who's gotten attached to you. I'm saying the words stuck in his throat. He'd spent so long surviving, keeping his head down, protecting himself and Emma from disappointment. Saying this out loud felt like exposing every vulnerable part of himself to someone who could destroy him. But Elena was looking at him like he was the only real thing in her world, and he couldn't keep lying. I'm saying I don't want this to be temporary anymore, Daniel finished quietly. Elena's breath caught. For a long moment she just stared at him, tears still wet on her cheeks, her hands trembling in his. Then she kissed him. It wasn't careful, or planned, or part of any performance. It was desperate and real, and tasted like salt from her tears. Daniel's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and Elena's fingers tangled in his hair. They kissed like people drowning, like this was air and they'd been underwater for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena pressed her forehead against his. "We can't," she whispered. "I know." "The contract? I know. This makes everything more complicated." "I know." Elena pulled back just enough to look at him. "But I don't want it to be temporary either." The admission hung between them, fragile and powerful. "So what do we do?" Daniel asked. "I have no idea." Elena laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "I've planned everything in my life down to the minute. My career, my goals, my 5-year projections. But this? I don't have a plan for this. Maybe that's okay. Maybe we just figure it out as we go." "That's terrifying." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It really is." They stood there in her office, holding each other while the city glittered beyond the windows, and didn't have any answers. But for the first time since this whole arrangement began, they weren't pretending. The board's official announcement came the next morning. Elena Sterling's marriage to Daniel Hayes was deemed legitimate. Victor's challenge was dismissed with a stern warning about future interference. Control of Sterling Enterprises would pass to Elena when the 1-year mark was reached. The news coverage was intense but mercifully brief. Public interest moved on to other scandals, other stories. Victor retreated to lick his wounds and plot his next move. Life at Sterling Enterprises continued, but in the penthouse, everything had changed. They didn't talk about the kiss. For 3 days after the board's decision, Daniel and Elena moved around each other with a new kind of caution, like they'd both discovered something fragile and didn't know how to hold it without breaking. They still shared meals, still talked about Emma's day, still existed in the same space. But there was a charge in the air now, a tension that made every accidental touch feel significant. Emma noticed something had shifted, though she couldn't articulate what. She started asking questions. "Why do you look at Ms. Elena like that, Daddy?" "Like what, sweetheart?" "Like you're thinking really hard about something." Daniel didn't have an answer for that. On Thursday evening, Elena came home early, before 6, which was practically unheard of. She found Daniel in the kitchen making spaghetti, while Emma sat at the counter practicing her letters. "You're home," Daniel said, stating the obvious. "I left work early." Elena set down her briefcase. "I thought maybe we could talk. After Emma goes to bed." The words sent a spike of anxiety through Daniel's chest. "Yeah, okay." Dinner was awkward. Emma chattered as usual, but the adults were quiet, responding to her but not to each other. After the meal, Daniel gave Emma her bath and read her 3 stories instead of the usual one, procrastinating. When he finally emerged from Emma's room, Elena was waiting in the living room, 2 glasses of wine poured. "I don't really drink," Daniel said. "Neither do I, usually. But I thought we might need it." Elena handed him a glass anyway. "Sit down, please." Daniel sat on the opposite end of the couch, maintaining distance. Elena looked at the space between them, and something flickered across her face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "We need to talk about what happened," she said. "In my office, after the board's decision." "The kiss." "Yes, the kiss." Elena took a sip of wine. "I've been trying to figure out how to address it, and I keep coming back to the same problem. I don't know the rules anymore." "What do you mean?" The contract was clear. What we were to each other was defined. But now, she gestured between them. "Now I don't know what we are. Are we still following the agreement? Are we changing it? Are we pretending that kiss didn't happen?" Daniel set down his wine glass. "Do you want to pretend it didn't happen?" "No." The answer came quickly, firmly. But I don't know what the alternative is. We still have 8 months left on the contract. The divorce is still scheduled. Nothing about our situation has actually changed. Except everything changed, Daniel said. Except that. Elena looked down at her glass. I spent my whole life being careful, Daniel. Planned and controlled and safe. And then you happened and Emma happened and suddenly I'm feeling things I didn't plan for and I don't know how to... She stopped, frustrated with herself. You don't know how to let yourself have something good, Daniel finished for her. Elena's eyes snapped to his. That's not... It is, though. You're terrified that if you admit you want this, it'll get taken away. Like everything else good in your life has been. Daniel moved closer, closing the distance between them. Your father died. Your brother betrayed you. You learned that the only person you could trust was yourself. So you built walls. And you didn't? Elena's voice was sharp. Your wife left you with a baby. Your father died leaving you with debt you couldn't pay. You've been surviving on your own for so long that accepting help feels like weakness. Don't pretend I'm the only one with walls. She was right. Daniel knew she was right. So what do we do? He asked. Two people with walls stuck in a fake marriage that doesn't feel fake anymore? Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down her wine glass and turned to face him fully. I think we stop calling it fake, she said quietly. I think we acknowledge that whatever this started as, it's become something else. And we decide if we want to explore that or if we want to keep hiding behind the contract. And what do you want? Elena reached out, her hand finding his. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. I want to stop being afraid, she said. I want to come home and not feel guilty for being happy to see you. I want to read Emma bedtime stories without calculating when I'll have to stop. I want... Her voice broke. Daniel squeezed her hand. I want this to be real, Elena whispered. Is that insane? We barely know each other. This whole thing was a business transaction. But I can't stop thinking about you, about Emma, about the life we're building. And I know it's supposed to be temporary, but I don't want it to be. Daniel's heart was pounding. Elena, I'm in love with you, she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I know that's probably the worst thing I could admit right now. I know it makes everything more complicated, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. The confession hung in the air between them. Daniel stared at her, this woman who'd been ice and steel when they met, now completely vulnerable in front of him. You're not the only one, he said finally. Elena's breath caught. What? You're not the only one who's in love. Daniel brought her hand to his chest, where his heart was racing. I fought it for months. Told myself it was just proximity, just gratitude for what you'd done for Emma. But it's not. It's you. Daniel, I love the way you butcher cooking, but keep trying. I love how seriously you take Emma's explanations of cartoon plots. I love that you work yourself to exhaustion because you actually care about protecting people's jobs, not just profit margins. He moved closer. I love you, Elena. And yeah, it's terrifying, but it's also the most real thing I've felt in years. Elena closed the distance between them, kissing him with a desperation that spoke of months of restraint finally breaking. Daniel pulled her closer, his hands tangling in her hair, and she made a small sound against his mouth that went straight through him. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena's eyes were bright with tears. This changes everything, she said. I know. The contract. We'd have to modify it, or void it. I don't even know how that works legally. We'll figure it out. And Emma, we'd have to tell her something. She can't think this is temporary if it's not. We'll figure that out too. Elena laughed, the sound shaky. You're very confident for someone who has no idea what he's doing. I'm faking it. Daniel kissed her forehead. I'm absolutely terrified, but I'm also sure about this. About you. They stayed on the couch for hours, talking through possibilities and fears and logistics. What would happen to the contract? Would Elena still transfer the money if they stayed together? Did Daniel even want it anymore if they were building something real? The money was never about getting rich, Daniel said. It was about giving Emma stability, security, a future where she didn't have to worry. She'll have that regardless, Elena said. If we're together, actually together, then what's mine is yours. That's how marriage works. Real marriage, maybe, but we didn't start there.
No, but we're there now. Elena shifted to look at him. Unless you're not comfortable with that. I know this is a lot. The money, the lifestyle, the expectations that come with being connected to Sterling Enterprises. Daniel thought about it, about what it would mean to be truly part of Elena's world, not just playing a role. The scrutiny, the pressure, the constant judgment from people like Victor. I don't care about any of that, he said. I care about you and Emma. Everything else we can handle. You say that now. Elena. Daniel cupped her face, making her look at him. I spent 3 years scrubbing toilets and fixing pipes in the building where you work. You think I'm worried about what people think of me? I stopped caring about that a long time ago. It's different when you're connected to me. People will say terrible things. They'll call you a gold digger, say you're using me. They already say that. But before, it was about a contract marriage. Now, if we admit it's real, they'll say you manipulated me, that you saw an opportunity and took it. Elena's voice was bitter. They'll never believe you actually love me, not for who I am. Then they don't know you, Daniel said simply. Anyone who actually spent time with you would understand exactly why I fell in love with you. Elena kissed him again, slower this time, softer. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Be in a real relationship. I've never had one that wasn't transactional in some way. Neither have I. Not really. Emma's mom and I were kids playing house. We didn't know what we were doing. Daniel ran his thumb along Elena's cheek. But we'll figure it out together. That's kind of the point. They fell asleep on the couch again, wrapped around each other like they were afraid to let go. Daniel woke first, around 5 a.m., to find Elena curled against his chest, her breathing deep and even. In sleep, she looked younger, the tension that usually lived in her shoulders completely gone. He didn't want to move and wake her, so he just lay there, watching the city come alive beyond the windows, thinking about how completely his life had changed in 4 months. From desperate and drowning to this, holding a woman he loved, in a home that felt real, with a future that looked nothing like the one he'd imagined. Elena stirred, her eyes opening slowly. For a moment, she looked confused. Then she saw Daniel and smiled, genuine and unguarded. Hi, she said. Hi yourself. We fell asleep again. Seems to be a pattern. Elena stretched, wincing. My neck is going to hate me. Couches aren't designed for sleeping. We could have moved to a bed. The words hung there, weighted with implication. Elena's cheeks flushed. I wasn't ready for that, she said quietly. Not yet. Is that okay? Of course it is. Daniel kissed her temple. We move at whatever pace feels right. No pressure. I want to do this right. Not rush just because we're feeling everything all at once. Elena, we're already married and living together with my 4-year-old daughter. I think we passed taking it slow about 3 months ago. She laughed. Fair point. They made breakfast together, a first. Usually Daniel cooked while Elena got ready for work, but this morning she stayed, attempting to flip pancakes and burning 2 before getting the third one passably golden. When Emma wandered out in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, she stopped and stared at them. You're both here, she said, like this was unprecedented. We are, Elena confirmed. Is that okay? Emma climbed onto a stool, considering this. Are you going to be here for breakfast now, every day? Elena glanced at Daniel, uncertainty in her eyes. He nodded encouragement. I'm going to try, Elena said. Would you like that? Yes. Emma reached for the syrup. Sophie's mom makes her pancakes every Saturday. Now I can tell her my Miss Elena makes me pancakes too. These are definitely Daddy's pancakes, Elena said. I just watched. You helped, Daniel corrected. That counts. After breakfast, Elena did something she'd never done before. She called her assistant and said she'd be late. Then she helped Daniel get Emma ready for school, braiding her hair with only minimal frustration, and came with them for drop-off. The other parents stared. Some whispered. One mother, Sophie's mom, it turned out, approached them with a friendly smile. You must be Miss Elena, she said. Sophie talks about Emma constantly. It's so nice to finally meet you. Elena shook her hand, caught off guard. Nice to meet you too. We're having a play date at our place this Saturday. Would Emma like to come? You're both welcome to stay, of course. We're pretty casual about it. Daniel saw Elena's panic. Social situations with other parents, casual weekend plans. This was so far outside her usual world. "That sounds great," Daniel said, jumping in. "What time?" After they'd confirmed details and Sophie's mom had left, Elena let out a breath. "I have no idea how to do play dates," she said. "You stand around drinking coffee while the kids play. Occasionally, you make sure no one's bleeding. It's not complicated. For you, maybe. I don't know how to make small talk with suburban parents. Elena, you negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts. You can handle talking to Sophie's mom." She didn't look convinced. The next few days established a new rhythm. Elena started coming home earlier, joining them for dinner most nights. She was still working long hours, but she was more present when she was there. She asked Emma about school, helped with bath time, read bedtime stories with increasingly confident character voices. One evening, while Daniel was doing dishes and Elena was helping Emma with a puzzle, he heard Emma ask, "Miss Elena, are you my dad's girlfriend now?" Daniel froze, hands in soapy water. Elena's response was careful. "Why do you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because you hold hands now, and you smile at each other a lot. That's what girlfriends do on TV." "Well, I'm actually your dad's wife, remember? We got married." "Oh, yeah." Emma fitted a puzzle piece into place. "But you didn't do it before, the holding hands and smiling." "No, we didn't." "Why not?" Daniel abandoned the dishes, moving to the doorway where he could see them but stayed quiet. Elena was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes grown-ups need time to figure out how they feel about each other. Your dad and I are friends, and we became better friends. And then we realized we wanted to be more than friends. Like in the princess movie, where she doesn't like the prince at first, but then she does? Something like that." Emma seemed satisfied with this explanation. She finished the puzzle with Elena's help, then looked up at her seriously. "I'm glad you like my dad now. He was sad before, after Grandpa died, but he's not sad anymore." Elena's eyes found Daniel's across the room. "I'm glad too," she said softly. Saturday came, and with it the play date at Sophie's house. Elena changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a sweater, anxious in a way Daniel had never seen her. "It's just parents and kids," he reminded her, "not a board meeting." "Board meetings I can handle. This is worse." But once they arrived at Sophie's house, a sprawling suburban home with a huge backyard, Elena surprised him. She talked with the other parents, asked questions about the neighborhood and schools, even laughed at someone's story about a disaster with a science fair volcano. She wasn't the ice queen of Sterling Enterprises. She was just Elena, trying to fit into a world that was completely foreign to her. Daniel watched her playing with Emma and Sophie in the backyard, pushing them on a tire swing, and felt something settle in his chest. This could work. They could actually build this life. On the drive home, Emma fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from playing. Elena reached over and took Daniel's hand. "That wasn't as terrifying as I thought it would be," she admitted. "You were great. Sophie's mom loved you." "She was very kind. They all were." Elena paused. "Is this what normal families do? Play dates and backyard barbecues?" "I think so. I've never really had it either." "We could, though. Have it, I mean." Elena's voice was tentative. "If we wanted to." Daniel squeezed her hand. "Yeah, we could." That night, after Emma was asleep, they ended up in Elena's bedroom for the first time. Not for anything physical, they still weren't there yet, but just to talk without the distance of separate rooms. Elena's bedroom was as impersonal as the rest of the penthouse had been when Daniel first arrived. Expensive furniture, neutral colors, nothing that revealed anything about who she actually was. "This room is depressing," Daniel said, looking around. "It's minimalist. It's sad. There's no personality, no photos, no books, no colors." Elena looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. "I never really thought about it. It's just where I sleep." Maybe that's the problem. They spent the next hour going through the penthouse, pulling out things that Elena had apparently shoved into storage closets over the years. Photos of her father, awards she'd won, a painting she'd bought on a trip to Paris and never hung. They brought everything to her room and started rearranging. "This feels silly," Elena said as they hung the Paris painting above her bed. "It feels human," Daniel corrected. "You're allowed to have things that make you happy." They worked until past midnight, transforming the sterile bedroom into something that actually looked lived in.
When they finally stepped back, Elena stared at the changes with something like wonder. "It looks different," she said. "It looks like yours." Elena turned to him, and in the dim light of the room, she looked vulnerable and beautiful and completely real. "Stay," she said quietly. "Not for... I don't mean just stay. Sleep here tonight. I don't want to be alone." Daniel understood what she was asking. Not sex, not anything physical beyond presence, just not wanting to retreat to separate spaces anymore. "Okay," he said. They climbed into bed together, fully clothed, and Elena curled into his side like she'd been doing it for years. Daniel wrapped his arm around her and she made a small, contented sound. "I could get used to this," she murmured, already half asleep. "Good," Daniel said, "because I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Daniel woke to find Emma standing beside the bed, staring at them with wide eyes. "Daddy?" she said. "Why are you in Miss Elena's room?" Daniel carefully extracted himself from Elena, who was still sleeping. He scooped Emma up and carried her into the hallway, closing the bedroom door quietly. "Sometimes grown-ups sleep in the same bed," he explained. "It's normal for married people. But you didn't before." "No, but things are different now." Emma processed this. "Different good or different bad?" "Different good." She seemed satisfied with this. "Can we have pancakes?" While they made breakfast, Elena emerged from her room looking sleep-rumpled and softer than usual. She poured coffee, accepted the kiss Daniel pressed to her temple, and sat down with them at the counter like this was routine. "This is nice," she said quietly, watching Emma dump way too much syrup on her pancakes. "Yeah," Daniel agreed, "it really is." But the peace didn't last long. On Monday afternoon, Daniel was at work when his supervisor found him again, looking grim. "Hayes, you need to see this." He pulled up a news site on his phone. The headline made Daniel's blood run cold. "Sterling heiress's contract marriage exposed. Documents reveal financial agreement behind fairy tale romance." The article detailed everything: the original contract, the payment terms, Daniel's debts, even quotes from anonymous sources at Sterling Enterprises about how sudden and suspicious the marriage had been. Victor. It had to be Victor. Daniel called Elena immediately. "I saw it," she said, her voice tight. "It's everywhere. Every news outlet, every gossip site. Someone leaked the contract." "How?" "It was confidential. Victor must have gotten to one of the lawyers, or someone in HR who had access to the payment records." Elena sounded exhausted. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is it's out there now. Everyone knows this marriage started as a business transaction." "What do we do?" "I don't know," she admitted. "My PR team is scrambling. The board is demanding answers. Victor's publicly calling for my resignation, saying I defrauded the company and dishonored our father's memory." Daniel felt sick. "This is my fault. If I'd never agreed—" "Don't!" Elena cut him off sharply. "Don't do that. We both made this choice. We're in it together." "Together," Daniel repeated, holding on to the word like a lifeline. "I need to go. Emergency board meeting in 20 minutes. I'll call you after." The line went dead. Daniel stood there in the maintenance hallway, his phone still pressed to his ear, and felt the walls closing in. They'd survived Victor's first challenge, but this was different. This wasn't suspicion or investigation. This was proof, in black and white, that their marriage had been bought and paid for, and Daniel had no idea how they were going to survive it. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he opened it. It was a photo. Him and Elena, clearly taken from the surveillance footage Victor had shown the board. But this shot was different. It showed them in a moment Daniel barely remembered, late at night in the kitchen. Elena was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm, her expression completely unguarded. And Daniel was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Below the photo was a message. "The truth is in the footage, all of it. You just have to know where to look." Brian. Daniel stared at the message, his mind racing. Someone had access to all the surveillance footage. Someone who'd seen more than what Victor had shown. Someone who might have evidence that their feelings were real. But who? And why send it to him anonymously? Before he could process it, his phone rang again.
Elena. The board meeting's in 10, she said without preamble. Daniel, they're going to ask me to resign. Victor's painting this as fraud, embezzlement, abuse of company resources. Even Harrison is wavering. Then we tell them the truth. The truth is damning. We did start this as a contract. The marriage was a transaction. That's how it started, Daniel said. But that's not what it is now. Elena, you told me you love me. You meant that, right? Of course I meant it. Then that's the truth that matters. We need to make them understand. This thing between us, it's real. Whatever it started as, it became something else. Elena was quiet for a long moment. If I do this, if I stand in front of that board and admit I fell in love with you, there's no taking it back. My professional reputation, my credibility, everything will be questioned. I know. And you? You'll be dragged through it too. The media will crucify you, call you every name in the book. I don't care. Daniel, I don't care, he repeated firmly. Let them say whatever they want. I know what this is. You know what this is. That's enough. He heard her breath catch over the line. Okay, she said finally. Okay, then we do this together. Together, Daniel confirmed. After they hung up, Daniel looked at the anonymous message again. Whoever sent it clearly wanted to help, but the real question was whether evidence of their genuine feelings would be enough to overcome the proof of their transactional beginning. He forwarded the message to Elena with a note. Someone's on our side. Her response came immediately. We're setting another trap. Be careful. Daniel pocketed his phone and got back to work, but his mind was elsewhere. In a boardroom 40 floors above him, Elena was fighting for everything they'd built, and all he could do was wait. The next few hours were the longest of his life. He picked up Emma from school on autopilot, made her a snack, helped with homework, all while his phone sat on the counter like a bomb waiting to go off. When it finally rang at 7 p.m., Daniel nearly dropped it in his rush to answer. How bad? He asked. Elena's voice was hollow. I need you to come to the office, now, and Daniel, bring the contract, the original one we signed. We're going to need it. Daniel called Mrs. Chen in a panic, asking if she could watch Emma for a few hours. 20 minutes later, he was in a cab heading downtown, the contract tucked in a folder under his arm, his heart hammering against his ribs. The Sterling Enterprises building was mostly dark, just a few lit windows scattered across the upper floors. Daniel's security badge still worked. He half expected it to be deactivated, and he took the elevator up to the executive level, each floor counting upward, feeling like a countdown to something he couldn't name. The boardroom doors were open. Inside, he found Elena standing at the head of the table, still in the same suit she'd worn that morning, looking exhausted. Harrison sat to her right, along with 3 other board members Daniel recognized from the previous hearing. Victor was there too, leaning back in his chair with the satisfied expression of someone watching their opponent drown. But there was someone else in the room Daniel didn't recognize, an older woman in her 60s, elegant and sharp-eyed, sitting beside Harrison with a leather portfolio in front of her. Daniel, Elena said, her voice carefully neutral. Thank you for coming. What's going on? Sit down, Harrison said, gesturing to the chair beside Elena. We have a situation that requires both of you. Daniel sat, hyper-aware of Victor's eyes tracking his every movement. He set the folder containing the contract on the table. Mr. Hayes, Harrison began, I'm sure you've seen the news coverage today. The contract between you and Ms. Sterling has become public knowledge. This puts the board in a difficult position. How convenient that it leaked right after Victor's challenge failed, Daniel said, looking directly at Victor. Victor smiled thinly. Are you accusing me of something? I'm stating facts. You lost, so you changed tactics. Gentlemen, Harrison interrupted, we're not here to assign blame for the leak. We're here to address its implications. He nodded to the older woman. This is Catherine Sterling, Elena's mother. Daniel's head whipped toward the woman. Elena had never mentioned her mother was alive, let alone involved with the company. Catherine's expression was unreadable. Hello, Daniel. I apologize for the dramatic introduction. I've been living in Europe for the past 5 years, but recent events brought me home. Your mother knew about this, Daniel asked Elena. I didn't tell her, Elena said quietly. But when the contract leaked, she saw the news. And took the first flight back, Catherine finished.
Because my daughter was clearly in over her head. Elena flinched at that. Mrs. Sterling, Daniel started. Catherine, please, and before you defend her, Mr. Hayes, understand that I'm not here to judge. I'm here because I have information that changes this entire situation. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a document. When my husband died, he left 50% of Sterling Enterprises to Elena, 50% to Victor. But what most people don't know is that he also left me a contingency option. She slid the document across the table. It was a codicil to the will, dated just weeks before Elena's father died. If at any point I determine that neither of my children is fit to lead the company, Catherine continued, I have the right to assume controlling interest until such time as they prove themselves worthy. I've never exercised this right because I believed in letting them find their own way. But this situation has forced my hand. Victor sat forward. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. The contract leak, the surveillance, the constant scheming, it's everything your father feared you'd become, Victor. And Elena, she looked at her daughter. You've made questionable choices. But unlike your brother, you've also shown growth. Mother, I don't need you to swoop in and save me, Elena said, her voice tight. I'm not saving you. I'm giving you a choice. Catherine's eyes were sharp. Both of you. Elena, Victor, this is what's going to happen. I'm invoking the contingency clause. Effective immediately, I assume controlling interest in Sterling Enterprises. The room erupted. Victor was on his feet, shouting about legal challenges. Harrison looked shell-shocked. Elena just stared at her mother, frozen. Catherine raised a hand, and somehow the room quieted. I'm not finished, she said. Here are the new terms. Elena, you will remain as operational director, but your decisions will be subject to my oversight for the next 6 months. If, during that time, you demonstrate that you can lead this company with integrity, not just competence, but genuine care for what it represents, then control passes to you permanently. And Victor? Elena asked. Catherine's expression hardened. Victor, you've proven repeatedly that you see Sterling Enterprises as an asset to exploit rather than a legacy to protect. You're removed from operational control effective immediately. You retain your shares and the associated financial benefits, but you no longer have decision-making authority. This is insane, Victor said. You can't just... I can, and I have. The codicil is legally binding. My lawyers have already filed the paperwork. Catherine's voice was steel. You can challenge it if you'd like, but given your recent behavior, the surveillance, the leaked contract, the media manipulation, I wouldn't recommend it. The optics are not in your favor. Victor's face was red. This is because of him. He pointed at Daniel. You're willing to destroy our family's legacy because your daughter married some janitor? I'm willing to protect our family's legacy from you, Catherine corrected. Daniel has nothing to do with my decision regarding your fitness to lead. That was determined entirely by your own actions. She turned to Daniel, her expression softening slightly. However, Mr. Hayes, you and I do need to have a conversation about this contract and about your relationship with my daughter. Daniel felt Elena's hand find his under the table, her fingers cold. The contract was my idea, Elena said quickly. I approached Daniel. He was in a desperate situation, and I took advantage of that. Did you? Catherine looked at Daniel. Were you coerced, Mr. Hayes? No, Daniel said. I wasn't coerced. I made a choice. A choice motivated by financial desperation. At first, yes, but... Daniel stopped, looking at Elena. Her eyes were pleading with him to be careful, but he was tired of being careful. But that's not why I'm still here. Then why are you still here? Because I fell in love with your daughter, Daniel said simply. The contract brought us together, but it's not what keeps us together. That's all Elena. The person she is when no one's watching. The way she tries so hard to do right by people, even when it costs her. The way she reads to my daughter in different voices and burns pancakes and falls asleep during movies because she works herself to exhaustion. Catherine studied him for a long moment. And the money? The $5 million specified in the contract? I don't want it, Daniel said. Elena's head whipped toward him. Daniel, I don't want it, he repeated, looking at her. Not if it means people think that's why I'm with you. Not if it undermines what we have. Mr. Hayes, that's very noble, Catherine said.
but impractical. You have a daughter to support. You need financial stability. I'll find another way. No, you won't, Elena said sharply. Daniel, you can't just... We had an agreement. You upheld your end. The money is yours regardless of what happens between us. I don't care about the agreement anymore, Daniel said. I care about you, and I care about proving that this, he gestured between them, is real.
If keeping the money makes people doubt that, then I don't want it. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Elena said, but her eyes were bright with tears. Probably, Daniel agreed. But I mean it. Catherine leaned back in her chair, something like approval in her expression. Mr. Hayes, I think I'm beginning to understand why my daughter chose you. She turned to Harrison. I believe we have what we need. The board can record my assumption of controlling interest. Elena remains in her operational role under supervision. Victor is removed from operational authority. Are there any objections? Harrison looked around the table. The other board members were quiet, still processing everything that had happened. Finally, Harrison spoke. I move to accept Catherine Sterling's invocation of the contingency clause. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Even Victor's allies knew better than to oppose Catherine when she was like this.
Motion carries, Harrison said. This meeting is adjourned. Victor stood, grabbed his briefcase, and walked out without a word. The other board members followed more slowly, leaving just Daniel, Elena, Catherine, and Harrison. Elena, Harrison said quietly, I've known you since you were a child. I watched you grow up in this company, and I'm going to give you some advice your father would have given you if he were still here. What's that? Stop trying to prove you're good enough. You already are. He squeezed her shoulder. The only person who doesn't believe that is you. After Harrison left, the three of them sat in silence. Elena was staring at the table, her composure completely shattered. Catherine watched her daughter with an expression that was equal parts exasperation and affection. You really made a mess of this, didn't you? Catherine said finally. Elena laughed, the sound broken. Yeah, I really did. Your father would have been furious. I know. But he also would have understood. Catherine's voice softened. He married me for money too, you know. Back when Sterling Enterprises was just getting started and he needed capital. My family had it. It was supposed to be a business arrangement. Elena looked up, shocked. What? We kept it quiet, obviously. But yes, our marriage started as a transaction. It took us years to figure out we'd actually fallen in love with each other. Catherine smiled. So when I saw your contract leaked in the news, I wasn't horrified. I was sympathetic. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because by the time you were old enough to understand, it didn't matter how we'd started. We were just us. Catherine looked at Daniel. The question I have for you both is simple. Do you want to be just you, or do you want to keep hiding behind contracts and arrangements and fear? Elena's hand tightened on Daniel's. I want to be just us, she said quietly. But I don't know how to get there from here. It's actually quite simple, Catherine said. You honor the contract. You pay Mr. Hayes the money you promised, and then you decide, both of you, whether you want to stay married because you choose to, not because a piece of paper says you have to. The contract specifies 1 year, Daniel said. We're only 4 months in. So honor that, stay married for the full year, but live that year as if it's real, not as a performance for the board or the media, as a real marriage with all the mess and compromise that entails. Catherine stood gathering her portfolio. And at the end of that year, if you still want to be together, you tear up the contract and start fresh. No prenups, no agreements, just two people choosing each other. And if we don't? Elena asked. Then you divorce as planned, and no one can say you didn't give it an honest shot. Catherine moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I like him. He's the first person I've ever seen make you laugh like you mean it. After she left, Daniel and Elena sat in the empty boardroom, processing everything that had just happened. Your mother is terrifying, Daniel said finally. Yeah, she really is. Elena turned to him. Did you mean what you said? About not wanting the money? I meant it, but your mother's right. I have Emma to think about. I can't make decisions based on pride. The money's yours, Daniel. It was always going to be yours. What we feel about each other doesn't change that. Elena took both his hands. But I need you to understand something. If you stay with me, it can't be because of financial security. It can't be because you feel obligated. It has to be because you want this life, with me, with all the complications that come with it. I do want it, Daniel said. I want you. I want us. I want Emma to grow up in a home where the people who love her actually choose to be there. Elena kissed him, soft and careful, like she was sealing a promise. 1 year, she said against his lips. We live it real. We figure out if this actually works outside of the contract. And at the end? At the end, we decide. Together. They left the office hand in hand, walking out into the cool night air. The city hummed around them, indifferent to their small drama. But for Daniel, everything felt different, lighter, somehow, despite the weight of what they still had to navigate. In the cab ride home, Elena leaned against him, exhausted. I should call Emma, Daniel said. Make sure she's okay with Mrs. Chen. She's fine. Mrs. Chen loves her. Elena was quiet for a moment. What are we going to tell her about all of this? The truth. Age-appropriate version, but the truth. That we got married for complicated reasons, but that we're staying married because we want to be a family. She's 4. Will she even understand? Probably not completely, but she'll understand that we love her and we're not going anywhere. Daniel kissed the top of Elena's head. Kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. When they got home, Mrs. Chen was reading on the couch while Emma slept in her room. She took one look at their faces and smiled. Good news, I take it. Something like that, Daniel said, paying her and thanking her profusely. After Mrs. Chen left, Elena went to check on Emma, standing in the doorway of the child's room for a long moment. She's so peaceful when she sleeps, Elena said quietly when Daniel joined her. No worries, no fears, just dreams. That's the goal. Keep her that way as long as we can. I want that too. Elena turned to him. I want to be the kind of parent who protects that peace, not the kind who disrupts it. You already are. They went to Elena's room together. Their room now, Daniel supposed, given that he'd been sleeping there more often than not. They changed for bed in comfortable silence, the kind that spoke of familiarity rather than awkwardness. In bed, Elena curled into Daniel's side, her head on his chest. I'm scared, she admitted, of messing this up, of not being good enough at this whole relationship thing. Welcome to the club. I've been scared since day one. But you don't show it, because I'm faking confidence to convince both of us I know what I'm doing. Daniel ran his fingers through her hair. We're both making this up as we go, Elena. That's okay. That's how it's supposed to work. She was quiet for a long time, then, I love you. I love you too. Even though I'm a disaster who creates elaborate fake marriages and nearly destroys her family's company? Especially because of that, Daniel said. You're interesting. Life with you is never boring. Elena laughed, the sound muffled against his chest. That's one way to put it. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time since this whole thing began, Daniel slept without worrying about contracts or timelines or what came next. The next few weeks were a strange adjustment period. The media storm over the contract leak eventually died down, replaced by new scandals and stories. Catherine took control of Sterling Enterprises with brisk efficiency, making changes that had the board both impressed and slightly terrified. Victor disappeared to one of the family's vacation properties, licking his wounds and plotting whatever came next, and Daniel and Elena learned to live like a real couple. It wasn't smooth. They fought about stupid things, whose turn it was to do dishes, how late Elena stayed at work, whether Emma needed a new winter coat, or if last year's would do. They had to figure out how to navigate each other's triggers and habits, how to compromise on things that seemed simple but weren't. Daniel had to get used to the fact that Elena worked constantly, that her phone was always ringing, that she carried the weight of an entire company on her shoulders. Elena had to learn that sometimes Emma needed attention right now, not in 5 minutes, and that family dinners mattered even when work was piling up. But they also had moments that made all the friction worthwhile, like the Saturday morning when Daniel woke to find Elena and Emma making breakfast together, actual cooking, not just watching, and the kitchen was a disaster of flour and eggshells, but Emma was laughing and Elena was singing off-key, and it was perfect. Like the evening when they took Emma to the park and pushed her on the swings until their arms ached,
and afterward got ice cream and walked home in the twilight, Emma between them holding both their hands. Like the night when Daniel came home from a particularly brutal shift at work to find Elena waiting with Thai takeout and a heating pad for his sore back, and they ate in bed while watching terrible reality TV and making fun of the contestants. Small moments. Normal moments. The kind that built a life. 3 months after Catherine's intervention, Elena came home with news. "The board approved my first major initiative," she said, setting down her briefcase with a huge smile. "We're creating a foundation, Sterling Community Fund. It'll provide grants to families dealing with medical debt, help with education costs, support local schools." Elena, that's incredible. It was actually inspired by you, by what you went through with your father's illness. She took his hands. "I kept thinking about how different your life would have been if you'd had help when you needed it. How many other families are drowning the way you were? The company can afford to help. We should help." Daniel pulled her into a kiss, overwhelmed by how much she'd changed from the cold executive who'd propositioned him in that office 6 months ago. "Your father would be proud of you," he said. "I hope so." Elena rested her forehead against his. "I'm trying to be this kind of leader he believed I could be." "You already are." That night, they made love for the first time. It was tender and careful, and nothing like the transactional arrangement they'd started with. It was two people choosing each other completely, no contracts or clauses, just them. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets, Elena traced patterns on Daniel's chest. "The year's almost up," she said quietly. 2 more months until the contract expires." "I know. Have you thought about what happens then?" Daniel caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Every day." "And I don't want it to end." He met her eyes. "I want to tear up that contract and start over. Make new vows that aren't about the company or money or anything except us. You and me and Emma, a real family." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I want that too, so much." "Then that's what we'll do." They made plans, quiet plans, just between them. When the contract's 1-year mark hit, they'd have a small ceremony. Nothing like the sterile civil service in the judge's office. Something real, with people they cared about. Mrs. Chen would be there. Sophie's mom and the other parents from Emma's school. Harrison, maybe, if he wanted to come. Catherine, definitely. And Emma would be their flower girl because she'd already started planning her outfit the moment they told her there would be a real wedding. "Can I wear my sparkly shoes?" she'd asked. "You can wear whatever you want," Elena had promised. But before they could get there, one more storm hit. Victor filed a lawsuit. Not against the company this time, against Elena and Daniel personally. He claimed fraud, emotional distress, and a dozen other charges that his lawyers had clearly crafted to cause maximum damage. The suit demanded the return of all money paid under the contract, punitive damages, and a public admission that the marriage had been a sham. The papers were served on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was at work when his phone rang. "Don't panic," Elena said immediately. "That's never a good way to start a conversation." "Victor sued us. Well, sued me primarily, but you're named as a co-defendant. It's a civil suit, nothing criminal, but it's ugly." Daniel closed his eyes. "What does he want?" "Everything. The money back, damages, public humiliation, the usual Victor special." Elena's voice was tight. "My lawyers say it's a nuisance suit. He knows he'll lose, but he wants to drag us through the mud." "Can he do that? Even with your mother in control of the company?" "He's suing us as individuals, not the company. It's separate." She paused. "Daniel, this is going to get messy. Press coverage, depositions, all of it. And Emma, she'll hear things at school. Kids will repeat what their parents say. Then we tell her the truth first, before she hears it from someone else." That night they sat Emma down in the living room. She was 5 now. Her birthday had passed a month ago with a party that Elena had helped plan, complete with a bounce house and way too much cake. She was old enough to understand some things, young enough that others would go over her head. "Emma, we need to talk to you about something important," Daniel began. She set down her coloring book, sensing the seriousness. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. But remember how we told you that Ms. Elena and I got married for complicated grown-up reasons?" Emma nodded. Well, some people think we did something bad. They're going to say mean things about us, and you might hear them at school. What kind of mean things? Daniel and Elena exchanged glances. How did you explain lawsuits and fraud accusations to a 5-year-old? They're going to say that Daddy married Miss Elena for money, Elena said carefully. That we're not a real family. Emma's face scrunched up, confused. But we are a real family. We live together. We eat dinner together. You read me stories and help me with my homework. We know that, sweetheart, but some people don't believe it. Then they're dumb, Emma said with the blunt certainty of childhood. Elena laughed despite herself. Maybe they are, but their words might hurt anyway. So we wanted you to know, no matter what anyone says, we love you. And we love each other, and we're not going anywhere. Emma thought about this for a moment, then she climbed into Elena's lap, wrapping her arms around her neck. You're my mom now, she said matter-of-factly. I decided. Elena's breath caught. She looked at Daniel over Emma's head, tears streaming down her face. Is that okay? Emma pulled back, worried. Are you crying because you're sad? No, baby. I'm crying because I'm happy. Elena hugged her tight. I would love to be your mom, if that's what you want. It's what I want, Emma said firmly. Then she squirmed down and went back to her coloring like she hadn't just changed Elena's entire world. The lawsuit dragged on for 6 weeks. Depositions, discovery, lawyers arguing over details that seemed designed specifically to humiliate. Victor's team dug into every aspect of their relationship, questioned their motives, tried to prove the marriage was still just a transaction. But they had evidence now. Months of living together, of building a life, photos of family dinners and school events, testimony from neighbors and teachers who'd watched them become a family. Even the surveillance footage that Victor had used against them now worked in their favor, because it showed the gradual shift from strangers to something real. And then there was Catherine. Elena's mother took the stand in the preliminary hearing and absolutely destroyed Victor's case. She testified about the codicil, about her late husband's concerns regarding both his children, about her observations of Elena and Daniel's relationship over the past months. Do I believe they married for love initially? Catherine said under oath. No. But do I believe they're in love now? Absolutely. I've watched my daughter transform from someone who worked herself to exhaustion to avoid dealing with emotions into someone who rushes home to have dinner with her family. I've watched Mr. Hayes go from viewing Elena as his employer to looking at her like she's his entire world. That's not something you can fake for months on end. The judge seemed to agree. 2 weeks later, Victor's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The judge ruled that even if the marriage had started as a contractual arrangement, it had evolved into a genuine relationship, and there was no fraud in 2 adults choosing to stay together. Victor didn't take the loss well. He showed up at Sterling Enterprises the day after the ruling, demanding to see Elena. Security called her office, and she went down to the lobby with Daniel beside her. You won, Victor said without preamble. His face was haggard, the polish completely gone. Are you happy now? No, Elena said honestly. I'm not happy that it came to this. I'm not happy that you and I can't be in the same room without trying to destroy each other. You took everything from me. You took it from yourself. Elena's voice was sad rather than angry. Dad gave us equal chances, Victor. I'm sorry you couldn't see that the company was more than just an asset to liquidate. I'm sorry you saw me as competition instead of family. We haven't been family in years. I know. And that's on both of us. Elena paused. But it doesn't have to stay that way. If you ever want to actually talk, not scheme or fight or compete, just talk, I'm willing to try. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Daniel put his arm around Elena as they watched him go. Think he'll take you up on that? Probably not. But I had to offer. She leaned into him. I'm tired of burning bridges. Then let's stop burning them. Let's build instead. The contract's 1-year anniversary fell on a crisp October afternoon. Daniel took the day off work. Actually, he'd given his notice 2 weeks earlier. With the money from the contract and Elena's support, he was going back to school to finish his engineering degree. It was terrifying and exciting and something he'd given up on years ago. Elena had also taken the day off, which was practically unheard of. Catherine was running Sterling Enterprises with the confidence of someone who'd been doing it for decades,
and she'd made it clear that Elena needed to learn work-life balance. They'd planned a small ceremony at a garden outside the city, just 20 people, the ones who actually mattered. Mrs. Chen was there with tears in her eyes. Sophie's mom and a few other parents from Emma's school. Harrison, looking proud. Catherine, elegant in lavender. Even Daniel's sister had flown in from across the country, meeting Elena for the first time and immediately approving. Emma wore her sparkly shoes and a white dress with a purple sash, carrying a basket of flower petals that she took very seriously. Daniel stood at the makeshift altar, watching Elena walk toward him. She wasn't wearing a traditional wedding dress. Instead, she'd chosen a simple cream dress that made her look radiant. No veil, no train, just her. When she reached him, she was smiling. "Hi," she said. "Hi yourself." The officiant, a friend of Catherine's who'd known Elena since childhood, cleared her throat. "We're here today to witness something unusual. Elena and Daniel are already married, legally speaking. They've been married for exactly 1 year as of today, but they're here now to make new promises. Not because they have to, but because they choose to." She nodded to them. They'd written their own vows. Elena went first, her voice steady. "A year ago, I asked you to marry me for all the wrong reasons. I was desperate and calculating and convinced that love was something other people did. You had every reason to walk away after the year was up, but instead you stayed. You showed me what it means to choose someone every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Her voice caught. "You taught me that family isn't about blood or contracts. It's about showing up, and I promise to keep showing up every single day for as long as you'll have me." Daniel had to clear his throat before he could speak. "I came into this thinking I was just surviving, doing what I had to do to take care of Emma. But you changed what survival meant. You showed me that it's okay to want more than just making it through the day, that it's okay to let someone help carry the weight." He took her hands. "You became my partner, my best friend, and the best mother Emma could have asked for. And I promise to love you, not the carefully controlled version you show the world, but all of you. The messy, imperfect, real you." Emma, who'd been standing quietly beside them, suddenly spoke up. "Are you done with the words? Can we do the kissing part now?" Laughter rippled through their small crowd. "Yes, sweetheart," Daniel said, grinning. "We can do the kissing part now." He kissed Elena while their family and friends applauded, while Emma scattered flower petals everywhere with enthusiastic abandon, while the autumn sun filtered through the trees and made everything golden. When they broke apart, Elena was crying and laughing at the same time. "We actually did it," she said. "Yeah, we actually did." The reception was held at a small restaurant nearby. Nothing fancy, just good food and people they loved. Daniel watched Elena talking with Mrs. Chen, saw Emma showing Sophie's mom her sparkly shoes, noticed Harrison in deep conversation with Catherine about the company's new direction. This was family. Chosen, built, real. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and the penthouse was quiet, Daniel and Elena sat on their bedroom floor with the original contract between them. "Should we burn it?" Elena asked. "Make it dramatic?" "We could, but I kind of want to keep it." "Really? Why?" Daniel picked up the document, scanning the clinical language, the payment schedules, the cold terms that had brought them together. "Because it's part of our story. Not the best part, maybe, but it's where we started. From this," Elena touched the contract, "to this." She held up her left hand where a new wedding ring sat beside the original gold band. This one had a small diamond chosen by Daniel and Emma together on a secret shopping trip. "From this to this," Daniel agreed. He folded the contract and tucked it into a drawer. "But we're not defined by how we started. We're defined by what we chose to become." Elena kissed him, soft and sure. "I choose you. Every day I choose you. I choose you too." 6 months later, the penthouse was packed with boxes. They were moving, not far, just to a house in the suburbs with a yard for Emma and a neighborhood full of kids her age. The penthouse had been beautiful, but it had never quite felt like home. This new place would be theirs from the start, chosen together, no ghosts of old lives lingering in the corners. Emma was beyond excited about the yard. She'd already planned where her swing set would go and which room would be hers. "Can we get a dog now?" she asked for the 100th time. We'll see, Daniel and Elena said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. Well, that's parent speak for yes, Emma informed them confidently. Catherine stopped by to help with packing, though mostly she supervised while telling stories about Elena's childhood. Daniel loved these stories. They filled in pieces of Elena he'd never known, helped him understand how she'd become the person she was. Your father would have liked Daniel, Catherine said at one point, while Elena was in another room. He always said the measure of a person was how they treated people who couldn't do anything for them. Daniel treated you like you mattered before he had any reason to. He did, Elena agreed, overhearing as she came back. He still does. That's because you do matter, Daniel said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. To me. To Emma. To a lot of people. Elena leaned back against him, watching Emma try to pack her stuffed animals with limited success. I never thought I'd have this, she said quietly. A family. A home. Someone who actually wants to be here. Not because of money or connections, but just because. Well, you have it now. All of it. Yeah, Elena said, smiling. I really do. The move happened on a sunny Saturday in spring. Friends from work helped load boxes. Neighbors from the building said goodbye. Emma cried a little because she'd missed the doorman who gave her candy, but cheered up when she saw her new room with its big windows and built-in bookshelves. That night, they had pizza on the floor of the empty living room because the furniture wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. Emma fell asleep between them, exhausted from excitement, and Daniel carefully carried her to her new room. When he came back, Elena was standing at the window, looking out at the quiet suburban street. What are you thinking? He asked. That a year and a half ago, I was alone in a penthouse, married to my work, convinced that was all I'd ever have. And now I'm here, with you, with Emma, starting over in a house with a mortgage and neighbors who will probably bring us casseroles. Terrifying, right? Elena turned to him, and her smile was radiant. The best kind of terrifying. Daniel pulled her close, and they stood there in their new empty house, holding each other while the neighborhood settled into evening quiet around them. They'd started with a contract, a transaction, a desperate agreement between two people who thought they knew exactly what they were getting. But what they'd gotten was so much more than that. They'd gotten family. They'd gotten home. They'd gotten the kind of love that wasn't planned or controlled or safe, the kind that grew in the spaces between what you expected and what you found. And standing there in that empty house with boxes to unpack and a future to build, and a 5-year-old asleep upstairs who called them both mom and dad, Daniel and Elena knew they'd gotten exactly what they needed. Not what they'd planned for, something better, something real.